Hi, hello, good morning, all parents and students. I'm teacher Weilun here. I'm the academic director from MyStretcher. And in case for those of you who are not MyStretcher students, let me just introduce MyStretcher for a short while. So MyStretcher actually is a tuition education center in Singapore, catering for educational services across, the primary and the secondary and also the pre-primary students. And for this week, because we also do recognize that this is a very crucial week for all P6 students and the parents who are going to receive the PSLE results early in the week next week. So what we have done is to really prepare a whole series of programs to really help our students and parents along. So just to also highlight, actually today is the very first of the many actually webinars and sessions that we'll be doing over the course of this week. So what we will be doing today for the morning is really in terms of an overarching view of the secondary school system, the key pathways. We focus on the IP because we do recognize that a lot of parents and students do have questions about, IP schools, right? So how do we think about IP schools? How are they different from other schools? What are the pathways and so on? So today's session, this morning's one is more focused on that. Tonight there will be another session. Tonight's session will be more focused on the SEC. That means the more conventional route leading to the SEC level or what the parents will know as the O-level exams at Set 4, right? So that will be for tonight. And thereafter, over the course of next week, after you all have gotten your results, we will be also holding a series of score-specific strategy workshops. So those score-specific strategy workshops for next week will be really targeted. It will be based on your individual score bands. So you can think of it as, say for PSLE score 4 to 6, 7 to 9, etc., etc. And that's where we will do these individual workshops to really help different groups of students because we do recognize that for the different score bands, there are different considerations when it comes to like school selection, and what are some of these considerations. So that is what we'll be doing next week as well. And so later on, I'll also show you all really a resource that we have developed for all our students. And I think that that's something that will be useful for everybody, be it in terms of like school searches, also in terms of using these school selection apps and tools to really come to some kind of analysis, at least for a first cut. So I'll also show you all that. And in terms of some of the key next steps that will be helpful for you all as you all make this very important, milestone in your life. Because you also do recognize that, it's not a easy process, right? So it can be quite overwhelming, particularly for, first-time parents who have students or children, going to PSLE and getting the results for the first time. There can be a lot of different uh, changes, right, compared to our time in the past, right? You can see, for instance, there is no more T-score system. Now we have the AL score. Then there's this thing about cut-off points. There's this thing about tiebreakers. So for some of you, that may come across as pretty overwhelming. And that's where actually today I will also shed some light on them and provide some clarification on some of the common misconceptions and questions as well, right? And to keep the session interactive, anytime that you all have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat too, and I'll be happy to take them live along the way too. Okay, yeah. So just make sure if you have anything, just put that in the chat. I'll look at it, and then we can take that along the way. Okay, yeah. So with that, let me toggle over to my slide for the day. So let me share screen. Okay, so you all should be able to see the slide now. Okay, yeah. So as mentioned, for this morning, what we are doing is really with regards to the selection briefing, providing a big picture overview, right, of secondary school selection, but I will focus a bit more on the IP related to NOMS, okay? And the main things that we'll cover today, number one is really in terms of the key secondary school programs, some strategies in terms of school selection. Third and fourth is some of those burning questions that people have about IP, right? So if you look at it, a lot of people think about integrated program as just integrated program alone. But actually, under integrated program, there's also different umbrella, right? There's different types of integrated program, and that's where we will give you all some flavor of that and also clarify some common misconceptions there. Okay, and number four, I think a lot of the questions that do come up is, okay, so how do I know if my son or daughter is really suitable for the IP program? And what's the difference between IP and the typical O-level SEC route? And that's where we also highlight some of these key considerations for and against for you to kind of think of balancing that as you consider your choices, right? And number five, as I mentioned, these will be the common questions and any misconceptions that do come up to right along the way. Okay, so also just to introduce myself, so I'm as mentioned, I'm teacher Weilun. I'm the academic director here at MindStretcher. So for myself, actually, I was also a beneficiary of the Singapore education system in that, it has been a place that given me a lot of opportunities. So I was from RI previously. I was the very last batch right before the integrated program, right? So that kind of gives you a sense of my age. But I myself am very plugged into the integrated program because we have worked with many students across the years who have gotten into the integrated program. And even from my own experience, also my juniors, my peers, friends, they have also been within the integrated program. And so definitely there's a lot of perspectives here, right? On the ground perspectives that will be helpful in terms of, some of these experiences, culture, and the environment too. Okay. And with that, so as mentioned, right, the scores will be out early next week. And you all will realize actually you technically only have a 1 week period, right, from the D-Day, right, landing of the PSLE 2025 results to submitting your school choices. And you will see from there, actually, it's not a lot of time, right? It's not a lot of time. So between the release of the results, or even I would say, to caveat, actually, it's not even after results release. Actually, it's like right now, what can you already do? Right? Up till the D-Day when you have to submit your results. That's what we also talk about, right? Because there is a lot of legwork, a lot of prep that you can already start to do. You don't even need to wait for the results to be released yet. And I think for all of you here who have decided to come for this briefing, that's already a good step ahead because you're also thinking ahead, what do you need to prep? What do you need to get ready as well? Okay. And with that, right, so the very first part I will cover is really on the types of secondary school courses and programs. So it's a bit more of an overview first before we go into some of those specific, like, be it scoring or, school selection strategies, and also in terms of uh, IP in particular. One thing that I want to also clarify is that so over the years, because we have done this for many years now, we do have parents who will ask, right? So, okay, I'm thinking about these schools. Can you tell me whether this school will be good for my son and daughter? Can you tell me which school is better? So just to clarify, this will not be the kind of questions that we are able to answer. Because if you look at it in terms of whether a school is good or not good or appropriate for the child, I think there's certain type of value judgment there, right? And it's also subjective, right? It also depends on the profile of the child. So we will not be able to, give an opinion on whether a school is better or not than other school, right? Because of the different yardstick that there is. But what we are really focusing on is really giving you all the information that you need with regards to the different pathways, the best strategies in terms of ranking of the six choices of schools. In fact, some of you may even wonder, like, is it really that critical? And later on, I will show you the context for why it is actually more critical now as compared to in the past, right? So that's what we'll give you, right? We'll give you all the information that you need to make an informed decision, but we will not be able to tell you what school you should choose. So that's the part that I think I should make clear upfront as well. Okay. So starting with this, so the very first part is really with regards to the secondary school courses and programs, right? Just a very quick heads up also to all the students here. As you all go into end of P6, and it's pretty much like a honeymoon period for you now, right? Where you are kind of taking a break, a rest and recharging. Of course, there's the nerves and the tension coming from the results release. But also do take note, I think, to all the students here as well, that just take things in your stride. That just realize, even though it sounds a bit scary now, P6 ultimately is just one milestone along the very long stretch of your life, right? So it's just the very first milestone. And regardless of the results, take it as just one step along the way. There are going to be many more of these along the way, right? So for those of you who are taking the exams at Sec 4, there's another milestone there. Then some at post-secondary, there's other milestones, right? So take it in your stride, regardless of the outcome. I would say make the best of the outcome, right? So based on the outcome that has been given to you, the results are done, I mean, your exams are done, right? So just make the best use of whatever the outcome is, right? And take it in your stride, right? So that's the thing to note too. But going into secondary, the thing to highlight is that you should also recognize that as you go into lower secondary, there's going to be a lot of adaptation, a lot of transition. it will be a new environment. There will be more subjects for you all to take. So definitely, you do need to manage your mindset. And definitely in terms of, finding a school that you feel is comfortable in terms of the fit with your own character, in terms of your own interest areas, that will be very important, right? So that's also something that will be helpful in terms of managing that transition for you. Okay. And here, okay, so what I want to highlight here upfront is a key change that has happened. And this is very relevant in the context of the Sec 1 posting exercise, particularly for parents who may not have like elder brothers, siblings who had gone through this exercise. So why I want to highlight this is that since 2024, so last year only, what has happened is this full subject-based spending has kicked into place for secondary schools in Singapore. So for all students with effect from last year, so you all are also part of the same group already going forward. You all will be part of this subject-based banding initiative. And for those of you who are not as aware of that, what is the implication of that? It's quite a big implication. So during my time, during your parents' time, there was this thing known as the express, normal academic, and normal technical programs. But with the introduction of subject-based spending, you will realize that that has been removed, right? And just to give you all a very quick sense of that, I won't go into this part in too much detail because this can be a whole webinar of its own. And I also note that a lot of you here today are probably a bit more interested in the IP track. And the IP track will be less relevant because for IP track, you all will be, if you want to go into IP, the program that you will be taking will be pitched at the highest difficulty level. So this one here for IP purely is not as relevant. But for the whole of the whole secondary school system, this is very relevant. So I'm just going to give you all a view of that. Then after that, we'll move from there. Okay. But just to let you all know, so essentially what that means is there's no more express, no more normal academic, no more normal technical. So in the past, you can think of it as depending on the scores that the children get, they will be placed in different buckets, right? So if they do well, they will be placed within the express bucket. Not as well, then they will be in the normal academic and normal technical. So MOE recognizes that if you look at it this way, right? Typecasting students into certain buckets, right, where they're just doing programs in a certain bucket may not be so ideal, right? Because students also need time to grow and they also need time to build up, right, in terms of their proficiency, their own preferences with regards to different subjects. So that's why subject-based spending came in. And what happens is instead of having students be placed in these different buckets, what's going to happen is the students themselves will get to choose different combinations of subjects instead at secondary school. And how does that look? So I'll go to the next slide so that you can see it more clearly. Is that you can think of it this way, right? So at secondary school now, there will be these three classification of subjects, right? G1, G2, and G3. And this is something that's quite new compared to in the past. In the past, there wasn't this, right? But right now, for your cohort, in fact, for your seniors cohort, it has been like that already. G1, G2, G3. And what does that map to? So the way you can think about it is this is at a subject level. So for each subject that you take, there will be these three classification, and each of these classification maps to a level of difficulty. Where G3, you can think of it as the highest difficulty for that subject, G2 as the middle, and G1 as the lowest, right? And a way for parents to also be able to visualize this a bit better is if you think of that difficulty level, the equivalent of it in the past, G1 will be like your normal technical equivalent, okay? G2 is your normal academic equivalent in terms of the difficulty level, and G3 is your express difficulty level, right? So that's how we'll look at it. And so if you think about this, as students go into secondary school, they will then take the subjects at this level, right? And they have flexibility in a sense to take different combinations of subjects. So it may be the case, for instance, I can let you know, it may be the case that a student maybe take several subjects in secondary school at the G2 level, right? So maybe he takes English, he takes science, he takes mother tongue at the G2 level, but it so happens that actually his mathematics is quite good, very strong, right? And he has proven it also from the PSLE. And then for that one, he will be allowed to take it at a more demanding level. That means he could take maths at the G3. So that student can now take, like, for example, English G2, uh, science G2, but math G3, for instance. And you'll see here, this is what I mean by a combination of subjects with difficulty level based on the profile of the students. And that is a bit different from the past system. The past system is I straight away I put you into normal acad bucket, you are just taking normal acad subjects. So y'all can see how that philosophy has changed a bit over the years. And that in short is the intent of subject-based spending. And then you may wonder, right? So how is this relevant, right, for the set one exercise? So it has a lot of relevance because you will see over here, right? It You should all be very familiar with this particular table here, which is essentially the PSLE scoring bands and the posting groups, right? And these posting groups here is actually based on the concept that I just taught you all just now, right? Which is on the G1, G2, and G3. So I'll use this table here to elaborate more on the implications. So what y'all can see here is on the left, the PSLE score, right? And just as a refresher to everybody, I hope everybody knows how to calculate that, but as a refresher to all, the PSLE score is essentially an aggregate, right, of all the scores of the subjects that your child has taken at the PSLE. So if you will know for each of the subject, there is an AL score that will be assigned to the child, right, based on the performance of the child. And generally, the better the child performs, the lower the AL score will be, right? So the best AL score, so say for example for math, it will be AL1, right? And the same goes for the other subjects as well. So if you then combine all that together across all four subjects, you will then get your overall score, right? So the lowest possible PSLE score you can get is a 4, right? And then the highest, right? The highest can go beyond 30, right? But the truth of the matter is if you go beyond 30, that's where you will not be within the posting exercise, right? Okay, but essentially you will be actually doing, if you look at it this way, right? Okay, we didn't actually, you will either have to stay back, right, in the primary school system, or you have to go into more specialized schools. Okay, so that's beyond 30. So now, if you look at just between 4 to 30, a few things that I want to use this table to clarify, which are quite important, is that one thing to note is your PSLE score will determine the posting group that your child will be assigned to, right? And what exactly is the posting group, right? So you may wonder, right? So a posting group, it can either be posting group 1, posting group 2, or posting group 3, okay? And what is the purpose of a posting group? So a posting group actually performs two main functions, right? So you can think of it this way. Posting group number one determines the type of schools that your child can select. Okay, that your child can select. So what do I mean by that? You can see, for example, here, right? Posting group 3, right? There are certain schools that only offer that particular posting group. Like, for example, posting group 3. They don't have posting group 2. They don't have posting group 1. Right? So one example of this is for some of the IP schools actually. So a lot of the IP schools, they either only have IP program or they have IP plus posting group 3 program. Right? They don't have 2, they don't have 1. So that means if your child is not eligible for posting group 3, then those schools are totally out of reach already. That means they don't even need to think about applying for them. So that's the first thing to think about. Okay, and later on I will show you an example from the school finder so that you can take a look at that. Okay, yeah. But that is the way to think about it. So number one, the posting group determines the schools that you are eligible for. Okay. Next, the posting group itself also determines the subjects that your child will be taking once they enter into secondary, right? And this column here links up to what I was talking to you all just now about. Remember? So under subject-based spending, there are these G1, G2, and G3 level subjects, right? Where G1 is the least difficult and G3 is the most difficult, right? So generally, you can think of it this way. For any child who is entering via posting group 3, the subject that he will be taking at Sec 1 will be at the G3 level. That means the highest difficulty level. Okay? Whereas if you are going in via posting group 2, then the subjects that you're taking at Sec 1 will be at the G2 level. G2 means it's the intermediate difficulty in that sense. Okay? And if you are going in via posting group 1, then the difficulty level of the subjects they are taking are at the G1 level. That means the lowest difficulty. So you can see here posting group performs another function, which is it determines the level of the subjects that you will be taking when you go into secondary school. Some of you may be very sharp and you may be wondering why is it that we say most subjects, correct? Most subjects. So the reason for that is like what I mentioned to you all. In particular, for some of these posting group 2 and 1, is the idea that MOE also considers that the child may be weaker at certain subjects but still very strong at others. That's the example that I gave just now, right? Where maybe the child is going in via posting group 2, but the child does show some proficiency in certain subjects. For example, the math is very strong, right? And the math is maybe the child got AL1. So that's where then there is the option for the child to take that subject at a more demanding level. So even though he goes in at posting group 2, he may be taking then English, science, he take at G2. But math, because he has demonstrated the proficiency, he can then take it at a more demanding level, which is G3. Okay, so that's why you can think of it as there's a caveat there, which is most subjects. But generally, you can think of it as the posting groups themselves will signal the initial subject levels that students will be offering at the Sec 1 level, right? And why do I want to make this very clear is because this is what you all will be seeing at the MOE School Finder website. So later I will show you that as well. And for parents who have never seen this new system before, you may be a bit puzzled. How come there's this posting group 1, 2, 3? What does that mean? Because you all are very used to the normal acad, normal technical, and express system, right? So now that has changed. So I'm just explaining to you how that works. For those of you who are still a bit not so clear, because it still looks very alien to you, I can also tell you an easier way to think about it, right? The very easier but a bit simplistic way to think about it is you can think of it as the posting group 1 is like the equivalent of normal technical in the past. Then posting group 2 is the equivalent of normal academic, and posting group 3 is the equivalent of express. So if that helps a lot more, you can think of it that way, right? It does achieve the purpose as well. Okay? Yeah, so that's the main part I wanted to clarify. And with that, there are also certain implications. So what is the implication here, right? So guys, y'all can see over here, uh, you can see a few interesting things from this table, which I also want to explain a little bit. Is you all see for these certain score ranges, for example, PSLE score 21 and 22, right? There is this 2 or 3. And then there's this PSLE score 25, there's this 1 or 2. Do you all know what that means? So let's say if you look at this, right, 2 or 3, what does that mean? Maybe just to keep it a bit interactive, you all can type in the chat. Based on your understanding of that, what does that mean to you, right? So as a parent, as a student, if you look at this score range, of course, we are hoping that the child can do as well as possible. But looking at the different possibilities, you look at 21 and 22. Why is that this posting group 2 or 3? Do you all know why? You all can type in the chat, right? If you all have a sense of it. Don't be shy, right? So it can be quite new to different people. So, but you can always just give a guess, right? So why is there 2 or 3? Right? But you see for 4 to 20, you don't have, right? 4 to 20 is just 3. 23 and 24 is just 2. But why is it 21 and 22 got 2 or 3? And then 25 got this 1 or 2. So what does it mean? Okay, so how do we think about it? Right. So any takers? Anybody wants to take a guess? Okay. Okay, so for this one, right, the idea here is that essentially for this category, the way to think about it is like that. Yeah. Uh, okay, so very good try from some of the folks here and parents. So I think some of the folks here are saying, so number one, school offers both. And then another parent says, okay, so it depending on the school cutoff point, child will be posted to either 2 or 3. Yeah, and then let me just see in the Q&A. So later on I will go through the Q&A. Okay, so thanks very much for the answers. Unfortunately, those are not quite the correct answer. Okay, but it's thanks for that also, because then it tells me whether you all know or don't know, right? And whether I need to go through or not. So it does tell me that I need to go through, right? So how we think about these 2 or 3, right, is that essentially it is a kind of MOE policy thinking, which is the idea here, right? If you look at it this way, is that if you are PSLE score between 4 to 20, you are confirming going into posting group 3, right? You cannot go into 2, you cannot go into 1, right? You will only be 3. So what does that mean is that you can only choose schools in posting group 3. That's what it means, okay? But if you are in 21 and 22, then something a bit special happen. Why? Because if you are in 21 and 22, we consider you to be more in this edge case on the margins. That means, you can be MOE kind of consider that, you can be actually somebody who can thrive well within a tree system. That means the express equivalent system. Or you may be somebody who needs a bit more help and a bit of a slower pace in the G2 system may be better for you. So we think of you as in between, right? And when you're in between, then we will make the call for you. That means what you have to do as a parent and as a student is you will make the call, right? Do you feel that a G2 level subject, right, environment is better for the child with a slower pace, or G3 is good? So some parents may be thinking, okay, my child got 22, but actually he's pretty strong, right? And he just flopped a bit for the PSLE, slip up a bit. So he still needs G3. I'm going to put him in posting group 3. Okay. But while some parents may think, okay, my child has this score, he needs a slower pace. A slower pace works much better for him. I'm going to go for posting group 2. Right. So that's how it works. So at that level, what it means when you see 2 or 3 is MOE is giving you the choice. You can pick one or the other, right? You can pick either posting group 2 or posting group 3. So that's what it means, okay? And then for 25, same. Right? So if you're at 25, MOE sees that you are in between, right? You could thrive in a one environment or two environment. So MOE is giving you the chance to choose, and you can choose, right? So you can choose either posting group 1 or posting group 2. Okay? So that's the idea behind that. Okay? But the catch here is this. So guys, when we look at this particular posting group, so maybe one thing that's helpful is maybe I would turn the attention a bit to the school finder so that y'all can take a look at that. Because I know some of you may not even have really seen the school finder, right? So you may not be able to put it in the right context. So I'm going to show you all that so that y'all can put it in the right context to see, now that you have seen this table, right, how it links to the school finder and the selection of schools. Okay. So the way to look at it is like that. So let me just end the show first. Okay. And then toggle over to the school finder. Okay. So right now, right, you all should be able to see the school finder page. Okay. So this is the school finder, right? So I think so it's okay, right? You all is able to see the school finder now, right? Okay. Okay, yeah. So what y'all can see this page is the MOE School Finder. I will put the link later in the chat so that y'all can all see that. But essentially, the School Finder is where you can find information on all the schools. I'm going to show you an example. So if you see over here on MOE School Finder page, you can see over here ACS Barker, right? So I'm going to go ahead to click on ACS Barker, and then you can see the first row, they say the PSLE score range of 2024. Okay, if I click on that, do you see? So guys, this is what I was talking about, where you see posting group 3, 2, and 1. And how do we read that? So the way to read it is that you can see the score cut off for posting group 3 will be here. Okay, the score cut off for posting group 2 will be here. And then the score cut off for posting group 1 is here. So essentially for ACS Barker, right, what you can glean from this table is that there are 3 posting groups that they offer, right? And for each of these posting groups, this is the cutoff, okay? So perhaps maybe since I'm on this page, right, and I know some of you have questions with regards to how to read this table, I will take the chance for you to interpret, right? I will show you how to interpret. And I think ACS Barker is a good one because it has almost everything, right? So you may wonder, well, how come got so many tables and column, how to read? So I will show you how to read. I might as well do that right now, okay? So if you all look at this here, the first thing to note here is that you all can see here the 3 posting group. So what it shows me, as I have mentioned, is that ACS Barker offers all 3 posting groups, right? 3, 2, and 1. And logically speaking, you will see that the cutoff point for the posting group 3, which is the most demanding level, the scores will be a lot lower. That's why you see the scores are a lot lower compared to posting group 2, which is a bit higher, and posting group 1 will be the highest. So a simple way to think about it is posting group 3 is like the express equivalent of the pass. Posting group 2 is the normal academic, and posting group 1 is the normal technical. Then some of you may then wonder, how do I read this and this? Okay, so the way to read it, right? The important part to note is actually this one here. right? And this one here, actually, if you look under posting group 3, this is what we call as the cutoff point, right? This is what we call as the COP. So the way I want you all to visualize it is like that. So we can think of it this way. This is based off last year's data, right? 2024 data, right? 2025 one is not out yet because 2025 is what you are going through now. So whatever scores, whatever cutoff points that we have is all based on last year's information, right? And what you can see from there is that these very scores, so you see there are two scores, right? The one right at the right side one is the cutoff point. And the way we can think about it is like that, right? How do we think about this nine, this cutoff point? Is that the very last student, so you can think of it as, a lot of students are trying to get into ACS Barker via this posting group, right? So they get in, they get in, they get in. The very last student to get in last year, right? The very last student, the total PSLE score for him was a 9, right? So you can think of it as if you visualize, right? He's the last guy who got in, then the gate for ACS Barker posting group 3 totally closed. So what was his point? His point was 9. And that's how we form the cutoff point. So that's how we read it. And this is important. Why? Because it gives you a reference for what that cutoff point could be this year. You see, that's why we always look at this part. Why? Because a lot of times from year to year, this cutoff point doesn't change that much. Typically, it's at most a plus minus 1 to a plus minus 2 change. Okay? So because of that, right, you can see actually in terms of this reference, it provides a good reference of what that point can look like this year. Okay? So that is what we call as the cutoff point. Okay? Then you may wonder, right? So guys, how do we read this? Right? So do you all know what's this? Maybe you all can type in the chat also, just to see your knowledge of that also. What is this? So I told you all this one is cutoff point, right? But what's this? Yeah, okay. So any questions? Any takers on that? Okay, but anyway, right? So I think there's a question in the chat. So does the NCOP includes a DSA student score also or only via set one posting? So there's a parent who asks, this cutoff point, right? Does it include the DSA score also or only purely those who went through PSLE? So my answer to that is only those who went through the PSLE, right? So why? Because you can think of it as the people who got in via DSA, they are totally out of the equation already, right? They already got in, right, into the school, right, in a non-PSLE route. And in fact, their requirement for getting into a school is a lot higher, right? All they need to do, right? So you see, for somebody who got in, so the parent who asked this, right? The person who got in via DSA, his score can be as high as 20 or 21 and he will still get in, right? So there's no way in which his score will be here because if his score was here, it would have put the cutoff point too much. You have distorted it too much. So the answer to that is no, right? DSA students are taken out of the equation. These are only the scores of PSLE takers who were involved in the set one posting exercise. Okay, so that's the answer to the question. Okay, yeah, and very good, right? So essentially, right, my question just now, right, on this particular part, you all understand, right? So this is the best score. This is the score of that first student who got in, right? The score of the first student who got in. So if you think of it, posting group 3, right? The best score of that top student who got into ACS Barker, this is the one, right? This is the 5. But I would say this one is a bit less critical compared to this, right? So this one will be something that you should refer to. And guys, you all make a very good point. So there's a parent in the chat who also asked, but last year was a bit special. And I also agree with that. So you all will also know, right? Last year was the dragon year. And so what happened is that from year to year, usually is pretty stable. And in fact, if you look at the trend, I can tell you from year to year, apart from the dragon year, right? You will see what happens very interestingly is like what I said, quite limited variance, at most plus minus 1, sometimes plus minus 2. And usually in a normal year, you wouldn't see a lot of changes in the most competitive schools. And what are the most competitive schools? The IP schools right at the end. Usually those are almost stable, like they don't really change that much in a normal year. A lot of the variance actually happens more in the middle or to the lower end of the spectrum, right? That's what you usually see. But last year was not a normal year, right? Why was it not a normal year? Because it was the dragon year. So dragon year, actually, there were a lot more applicants, right? So you can think of it as if you look at the cutoff point, right? Cutoff point is really determined by is demand and supply actually. So just to make sure everybody is on the same page, right? These scores here, this is not dictated by MOE, it's not dictated by the school, right? So these are, it's almost like, think of it like as the price of an orange in the market, right? How do we determine the price of an orange? It's determined by the demand for the orange and the supply of the orange, right? It's the same here actually. So the cutoff point here is actually determined by how many people want to get into the school and how many places are available in the school. So what happened last year was because it was the dragon year, there was a huge surge and pickup in terms of the applicants, right, to schools. But what was not so clear last year before the exercise wrapped up was where would all this demand go? Because if you think about it logically, right, there are pickup, but it won't be across the whole system. So you will start to see that, oh, actually some of this demand, it goes into certain pockets of school, right? So certain pockets of schools will get that more than others. And sure enough, you will see actually that was what happened, right? So if I give you some notable examples, RGS was one of the one that actually trended down, right? After 1 or 2 years of stability, it actually went down. So my advice here is that in terms of this, it will be helpful to actually see it on a trend basis. That means we do also look back over beyond 2024 to also see, like, for example, like on the 2023 basis, right? It will be good to kind of get a view of that for some of these schools actually, right? That will be one perspective that you can have, right? To take into account that. But you also will see that, for some schools, it didn't change, right? So that means for some schools, right, the cutoff point was still fairly stable, right? And notwithstanding 2023, notwithstanding 2024, and then you will see that actually, it's pretty promising. Why? Because it does show that it's pretty stable, and whatever that was last year actually will provide a kind of good reference for what will happen this year. Okay. But for schools that you see it actually trended down last year. So if you think of it this way, right, logically speaking, one perspective here is, maybe for the last couple of years, 2023, 2022, it was pretty stable, right? It held 6. But suddenly in 2024, it trended down to 5. And we can understand that, in one part of the reason could be because of a dragon year effect. So then the way to think about it is there is a possibility that this year then it can trend up. That means from a 5, it could go back up to a 6 again. So that is the way to think about it actually, right? That's what we call as that trend analysis. There is that perspective. Because last year was indeed a more special year, where some of these effects could have, cascaded down the system. Okay. And what does that mean in terms of the school choices? That's what I will talk about later. Okay. But for now, just to highlight to you all how to read this table. In case some of you are also wondering, what is the difference between affiliated and non-affiliated? If you all can see here, right? Affiliated only applies to students who are in a primary school that's affiliated with ACS Barker. That means if you are in the ACS Barker primary, then you have affiliation status. Okay, affiliation status. But if you are not there, then you will be in the non-affiliated category. That means the scores that you need to fulfill is under here. But if you are in the affiliated primary school, then it will be here. But guys, I have a question for y'all, and y'all can type in the chat. For y'all to be able to meet the affiliated status. Okay, so maybe I'll ask y'all a question, then y'all tell me whether it's true or false, okay? Uh, okay, you want to enjoy this affiliation benefit, right? Of the 6, because y'all know y'all got 6 choices of school, right? So as a parent, I'm thinking, okay, so I'm affiliated, right? Affiliated, okay, can. I'm going to put it like choice 2. Choice 2, I will put it as maybe not even choice 2, choice 3, choice 3. I'll put it as choice 3. And I know I got affiliated status, so it should be quite okay, right? Is that the right way to think about it? So I will put it as choice 3, and I will still have affiliated status. I will still have affiliated benefits. True or false? Is it correct or wrong thinking? Right? I put as choice 3, and I have affiliated benefits still. Okay, very good, right? So like what Jeanette, what Ambu mentioned, exactly false, right? Why? Because for you to enjoy the affiliated status, you need to put as first choice. Remember, first choice to enjoy the affiliated status. So they want to see the commitment from you actually. So that's one part that's very important, right? That you all need to recognize. Okay, can? Yeah. Another thing to note, so guys, another question from a parent is, will the schools retain the additional spaces created by last year's demand for this year's cohort? I will not see it that way. So the idea is that you should think of every single exercise as a new exercise of its own. So it's not a carryover from last year because it's also a different cohort, right? So if you think of it in terms of be it planning and everything, if you're looking at it in terms of a different cohort, uh, it differs, right? So in terms of the take up. So that's why you can see even in schools, like last time, even in school, when you're in school, the Dragon Year cohort is super big. But after that, the next year, the cohort becomes small again. So it's not that, they will then have spillover spaces and all that kind of thing, right? So it's at a cohort level kind of basis, right? Okay, so that's the part to take note. Okay, Ken? Yeah, so that's the answer to that question. So I'm also answering questions along the way. So feel free to, anytime that you are thinking of any questions, feel free to type in the chat. Okay. That's the part. Okay. So in short, I would say that if you look at it this way, okay, so maybe I'll just take the chance to answer another question. So um a child has a score of posting group 3 and he chooses one school. The school is popular. Will there be a wait list? No, so there won't be a wait list under this system. Okay. So guys, to be very clear, under the set 1 posting exercise, there is no wait list, right? That means of your 6 choices of school, if you don't, so the way to look at it is this way, right? So the 6 choices are arranged in order of priority. So the one that you want to get in, you should put as choice 1 to maximize your chance of getting in. Okay, so what's going to happen is as the search algorithm goes through, if you can't get into your first, okay, what they will do is they will look at your second, right? If you can't get into your second, they look at your third. You can't get into third, they look at your fourth, all the way down, and hopefully you get in by 6. Okay, because the idea is if you still cannot get in by 6, which is the most unideal scenario, then what happens is MOE will just put you in a school with remaining vacancy based on your residential address. Okay, but you don't want to go there, and that's why later on I'll give you some tips on how to avoid that scenario. Okay. Um, but very importantly, you see then there's no wait list. So there's no such thing as you can't get into one, you can wait. There's no waiting because they have to assign you then into the next school already. Because there's implication, you see, because you cannot like tell the school wait because the school itself is also catering to other people who want to get into the school. Because you can think of it as really a pretty massive exercise now, right? Many people having similar cutoff points getting into schools, uh, many people with similar PSLE scores trying to get into schools with similar cutoff points. So it's quite a massive exercises of getting the people into the schools themselves. So it's not like the DSA system, right? DSA, that is like, like I think this parent is thinking about it more from a DSA perspective, where you have accept, you have to wait listed and everything. So it's not under that system. Okay. So just to be clear on that. Okay. Yeah, so that's the part to note. So I've answered that. Okay, which year's COP to refer to? So guys, I would say here, definitely last year's one will still be a good reference point, right? But what I'm saying is what will be more useful, what will be equally useful is that beyond last year's one, taking into account some of the schools that were impacted, right? Because the thing is that not every school was actually affected. For many schools, right? For many schools, if you just look through the list, actually it's pretty much the same, right? So that means they weren't really affected much by the Dragon Year effect. So I would say that largely 2024 is still a good point of reference, but it's just for those anomaly, right? Those anomalies that were created because of Dragon Year. So I give one example just now. Then those are, it may be good for you to think a bit further back. So if you look at it as 2023, you can see that was the trend. It actually trended down like Raffles, RGS, right? Then that is one thing to take note. But if you just see across the board, right, many schools were actually I wouldn't say spared, but they were not impacted by the Dragon Year effect. So in a sense, actually, if you look at the 2024 one, it's still a good base for reference, but it's just also taking into account some of this effect only for some of the schools. But for that one, right, I will not be able to go through because you can see it's too school specific. So that's why next week when we have some of this consultation session that is based on the individual score ranges, then that's where we can go into it in more detail, a bit more. Because that one really, you can think of it as there are many different score range, right? So I won't be able to go into that in as much detail. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So a parent has asked if I put the gambling school, safe school. This one I'll talk about it later, right? The school choices. Okay. How to look at the school choices part. Okay. Uh. Okay. Very good question from Ritik. What if you put the same school in both DSA and school? So my understanding from Ritik's question is I suppose lah the implication is what if I kena rejected from DSA? So I tried the school for DSA, I rejected. Can I still put it for PSLE or not? Right? So maybe you all can answer, right? I think just to keep it interactive. So retake, so maybe I'll just put the question. So the child applied via DSA, got rejected from the school for DSA. Can he still put it in his six choices now for PSLE for that particular school? Yes or no? Right? You all can type in the chat. So he got rejected from DSA for the school, right? So he's asking, can he put the school in his six choices? Yes or no? Correct. Good. Right. So I think all of you are on the right track. Definitely can. Right. So definitely yes. So guys, don't feel like because you got rejected, you cannot put. You should put. So I suppose that will be your dream school, right? You should put, and it should be as high up as possible, right? Of course, I need to look at your overall PSLE score, lah. So there is a certain level of margin of error that we want to have that I'll talk about later. But definitely put, because DSA was on the basis of whether you were suited based on what you can contribute in the talent domain. So the school is just assessing, okay, the talent domain that you say, you can't really go in, right? I don't really need you on this talent domain. But they're not saying you can't come to my school, right? So if you do subsequently show that you have the proficiency via PSLE, definitely you should. Okay. So just to be very clear on that. Okay. Okay, so next, okay, I will answer some of those school choices related question. And yes, so what Jeanette said is definitely correct, exactly. Right. So if they rejected you during DSA, but you can still show that you have done well via PSLE, they will love to have you, right, on the basis of your merit on your academic performance. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so that's the part to note. And I hope that is clear now using ACS Barker as an example, how we interpret all of this. So you can see here, ACS Barker is an example that has both posting group 3, 2, and 1, right? And then some questions by parent will be, okay, so what do I look at? So we got 3, 2, 1, so which one do I look at? And this is linked back to what I said in my slide just now. What you look at is largely determined by MOE and by your score already. So that means if you were in the score range that I mentioned just now, certain score ranges, you would just be in posting group 3. So you just have to look at posting group 3. Okay. Then for certain score ranges, you will be posting group 2, then you look at 2. Right. So that's what it will look like. So if I show you, right, an example, so what y'all will see here actually is using this as an example, right? This is the set 1 option form that you would actually see, right? um, you will see here, right, the eligible posting group 2, right? So the idea here is that it's already spelled out for you already. So it's default because there are many score ranges for which is by default, you will be only in that posting group. The only one that I mentioned just now, right, that you can choose, right, is only those two special case, right? The 20 and 21 and the 25. Then that one you can choose between posting group 3 or 2, and then for 25, PSLE score 25 is between posting group 2 or 1. Those are the only ones that you can choose. But everything else is pretty much set. That means if you see, right, so you see this on the form, posting group 2, that means you are only eligible for schools within posting group 2. Okay? And that means when you look at places like ACS Barker, right, like the one that I mentioned just now, then you will be looking at this one. You don't even need to look at 3 anymore because you are not eligible for 3. So this is what I mean. Okay? And again, how do we determine that? Is determined based on your overall PSLE score. Okay? Okay, so that's the part to know. Okay, so another very common question that comes out from this, just to clarify the misconception, uh, again, in terms of the thinking. So some parents may be thinking, okay, so if I look at the slide just now, right? If I go back to the slide, oh, I see my child is 21, then it's posting group 2 or 3, right? So maybe what I will do is like that. So I'm going to choose my school like that. So I will show you, right? So on my 6 choices of school, right? For choice 1, I will choose maybe Temasek, right? And then I will do it as posting group 3. Then choice 2, ACS Barker, ACS Barker. Then that one maybe I'll do as posting group 2. And then number 3, maybe Ang Mo Kio Set. And then that one, I think like not bad, I do it as posting group 3. Does this work? Do you all think something like that is correct? Is the correct way to think about it? So this is a very common misconception also. So I just want to clarify once and for all. So this is how they think about it. So Temasek posting group 3, ACS Barker posting group 2, Ang Mo Kio posting group 3. And that's how they are thinking about their selection, right? Is it the right way to think about it? Yes or no? Okay, very good. Right. So Ambu say no. And anybody else? Anybody else? Just to check the understanding, right? Okay, some say yes, some say no. Okay, the correct answer here is no. Right. So to be very clear, guys, if you are in that category just now, the one that I mentioned, right? Like the two or three, what you will do at the start is you will just key upfront your choice really. Do you want to be two or do you want to be three? And once you go on that route, then you must be committed to it. So let's say, for example, you choose posting group two. What it means is that then for your list of six schools, right, it must all be posting group two. Okay, there's no such thing as mix. So guys, this is a very common error that people usually have going into the prep for the six schools. They will think like I can mix one, but there's no such thing. Okay, once you are landed on one posting group, all your schools must be in that posting group. Okay, to be very clear. So the six choices here, there's no such thing as three and two one. It's either all three or all two. Okay. So that's the thing I wanted to clarify too. Okay, so that's the other thing to take note. Okay, so that's the part that I wanted to highlight here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the slide and then I will take the chance to also answer more question along the way. Okay, so I have already addressed this particular portion, right? Which is you must choose. You will only be based on one posting group, and it will this is what I mean, right? So it will apply to all the submitted choices. So there's no such thing as Tapalang, PG2, PG3 don't have. Your six choices must all be the same posting group. Okay, so that's very important. Okay, yeah, so that's the part to note. Okay, let me see if there's any other pertinent questions that I should take right now. Um, okay, I do see a few based on school selection. So later on, I will go through that one. Okay, higher mother tongue. So I do see a bit of that. I will go through that later, but I will in some detail. But just to answer, higher mother tongue is more important in the context of higher Chinese for SAP schools, right? And how does that work in terms of the preference? Uh, Essentially, for the SAP schools, higher mother tongue can give an advantage, right? If you have done it and you have done it better than another student who is trying to go into the same school. Okay, so that is my short answer now. Later on, I will show you a example of it so you can see. But to be very clear, this only applies on the basis of SAP schools, but or what we call as SAP schools. But the SAP schools, to be clear, also is based on Chinese. So that's also the other thing to highlight. Okay, later on, I'll show you how that works in terms of the advantage that it confer, right? But you may ask also, maybe I'll also take the chance to clarify now, then must you have it? So that means if I don't take higher Chinese, can I go into SAP school or not? That means, is it a requirement? Then the answer to that is no need, right? It's not a requirement to have higher Chinese to go into a SAP school, okay? But you must be clear lah, right? SAP school, what SAP school about? SAP schools is really developing the child's ability in terms of like culture, mother tongue, languages, and so on. So if you do want to go there, even if you didn't take higher Chinese in primary, you must be prepared that the level of rigor and proficiency you have to take in terms of mother tongue Chinese in the school will be high, right? So that's the other thing, right? In terms of the expectation there, okay? But later on, I'll show you what is the advantage that it confers you, right, in the school ranking, okay? Yeah. So I have talked a bit about the first part already, which is subject-based banding, how to read cut-off points, how to think about the posting groups, right? So hope that was clear. Now I want to talk a bit about right now, from now till like next week, even when the results are first released, what can y'all already do? And here I would suggest, so I have actually shown you all just now, right? The MOE School Finder page. So y'all can look at this link here, right? So this is the link. So later on, I will put it in the chat as well. Or maybe Sweaty, if you don't mind, you can help me to just share that School Finder link in the chat for all parents, right? So that is the link actually that I showed you all just now. That if you all click through, you all can use that as a way to find the different schools based on the distance from the locations, subjects offered, programs offered, etc. Okay, I'm going to show you all another link, which is a tool that we built on our own that complements that. So I would say that it doesn't duplicate what is already there on School Finder, but it complements whatever that is on School Finder, right? So I'm going to show it to you all. So you can think of it as, so what can you all do now? right? As you are, preparing for the results release and everything, the way to think about it is you can already go to School Finder, right? And you all can actually look at that, right? So I'm going to just go back to the School Finder just to show you all some of the key things that you all can do from there, okay? So let me toggle back to that, okay? So if I just share my screen again, okay, and I go to the School Finder page that I was on just now, right? This is the MOE School Finder page. And under the MOE School Finder page, the thing to note is that, so if you click on secondary school, there are several functionality that you can use to already search for the schools that you are interested in. So a few things here, right? So number one, you can actually think about location. In fact, for location, it makes sense that, it's one thing that a lot of parents do think about, right? That maybe, as far as possible, if the child can have a place that is nearer to the home, that would be great. So what you can do is you can just key in your code here, right? So I can key in my postal code, and then you can see here, they will recommend the schools that are nearer to you, right? In that region, right? That's one. Two, you can also think of it in terms of like the subjects that they offered, the CCA, and even in terms of the score range. So you can see over here, right? The score ranges here. That's already one way that you can see, right? So for example, if I'm looking at score ranges between like say 8 to 20, then you will see that they will also further filter out the list for you, right? So from there, you can already think of it as it's like casting the net wide, right? By looking at this, I can kind of filter based on like location, based on cutoff points, the schools that I want to narrow down a bit. So from here, I can see, okay, so based on this, okay, 8 to 20, why? Because I'm not very sure how I will do. So just a wider range. And then I'll see, okay, not bad. Seems like, its age field sounds reasonable. So I'll click on it and then I can get the information. So you see here, PSLE score range. That's where I can get the information on, what that point looks like from last year, right? And, that would be a reference point for you. Okay, so that's the first part. The other tool that I just want to introduce to you all right now is this actually tool that we have developed here at MindStretcher. It's free access to everybody, and we'll give you all the link later. And in fact, you can see this is a one-stop shop. So later on, I will talk a bit about this. It's a one-stop shop for everything actually. So it's a one-stop shop for all the events that we're holding this week to help everybody along. So y'all can just sign up here. Very, very convenient for y'all. Plus also the tools. And what are the tools that we are going to have here, right? So two things, right? So now I'm going to show y'all first is the browsing of the school. So if you click on the browsing of the school, right, essentially what you can see is a way for you to think about. So essentially, if you key in your score, right? So maybe your score was a 9, okay? And then maybe you got higher Chinese grade was a distinction, right? Under that perspective, right? So if you search what are the schools based on last year's cutoff, you will be able to make it into. So that's a view lah. That means essentially based on last year's data, 2024 data. And you can see here, this is what I mean, right? Cutoff is the last student who got into the school last year. The best was the first student who got in, right? So from there, you can actually have a view of, okay, so if my child got 9, right? And I'm looking at this posting group 3, then these are actually the schools that actually my child will be eligible for. So that's a way for you to also look at them, and you can also see like the postal code and everything. So that's one way for you to see, and do the cast the net wide, right? So that's the first part. Okay. Later on, I'll pass you the link. So there are some more features here I want to show you all, not just this only. This is just the first part. On like school selection and everything that y'all can also utilize. So the other thing that I also wanted to show y'all is, so back to what I mentioned just now, right? Then you may ask me, but teacher, right? So you cast the net wide already, then what? The next thing is after you cast the net wide, right? Then that's where you need to zoom in on the deep dive on your schools of interest. So after I've done that, right? So I look at near Pasir Ris, all these schools in this score range, and I see a few that catch my eye, right? I will then zoom in on those, and I see, this school sounds interesting, like Haixing Catholic or Springfield and so on. I'm going to just click go to the website. So there are two things that you can do. Go to the school's website, find out a bit more about school. In fact, open houses, right? Some of the open houses are already ongoing. Check them out and see whether, like it's a good fit, right? In terms of the school culture and the environment for the child also. So that's how you can do a further deep dive into that. And the whole purpose of then these two combined parts is then you can think of it as a way for you to identify your list of schools, right? Identify your list of schools, okay? And how do we go about that? So that's the next part I want to go through. So you can see over here, right? I would say from now, right, while you have time as you're prepping, you can even think of it as, 10 schools that you have. So one thing that come out, I'm sure it comes out also that you may ask, right? But teacher, now I don't have a score yet. Then how? Okay, one way you can do it for now is you can use estimated score first. Use what your child got for the prelim, correct? So you can base off that first, right? Of course, hopefully is if your child did really well, you will hope that it's as close as possible. And if your child didn't do as well, then hopefully you can make much more improvement for the PSLE lah. But for now, that's the best that you have, right? So you can anchor on that, and then based on that, right? Based on be it the prelim score or your own estimated score, right? Your own estimated score, you can then list out like 10 schools. Why 10? You just to be clear, your overall choice you only have six only. But why 10 is because we are looking at it in terms of buffers, right? So you can kind of narrow down, throw away some, adjust some, that kind of thing, right? Have some buffer a bit at the start, right? So at least about 10, right? And base that off like estimated score. So estimated score, then you have to use a bit of judgment lah. So maybe now your child's estimated score is maybe it's like a AL, I mean overall PSLE score of like 11. Then you may think of it as, okay, 11, is that reflective? Like based on the individual subjects, like did he slip up a bit? So you may feel like, actually it's 11, but actually his mathematics he should have done a lot better, right? So maybe he got like AL 3, but actually he could have done better, could be a AL1. Then you can adjust a bit. Maybe you feel that his overall score could be a 10. That's how you can think about it in terms of the estimated. So based on prelim, then from there adjust a bit, right? Then use that, go to MOE School Finder or our tool, and then use that to narrow down the schools, right, that he can make it for based on last year's cutoff. And then from there, right, narrow down, right, do a deep dive, go into the school's website, understand a bit more about the school's culture. That one I can be very realistic in that there's really only so much you can do. Even if you look at their school's website, even if you look at their open house, there's only so much you can glean on the first glance, right? One other perspective is it's also useful to talk to some of the seniors, or even friends or relatives that you know who are in those schools, so you can get a better sense also of the culture of the environment there also. So that's something that I will also suggest, right? And from there, then what you can see is you can then narrow down, right, the 10 schools. Uh, and from there, that's where, okay, based on your understanding of your child's ability, of your child's preference, you can have a discussion with your child, right? So based on these school choices, what could it look like? Right? What could it look like in terms of the choice, right? So you can do that now for a first cut. Then when the results are out, do it again, right? So when the results are out, of course, that will be the actual one, lah, right? Then you can actually use that to then factor in, right? So what would be the listing? What could that look like? Okay. So that's a thought process behind the kind of legwork that you can already put in right over here, right? Okay, let's pause here to see whether there are any questions at this particular part. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I think there's some questions with regards to the IP part now. So I will be coming to the IP later, but just to be clear, because remember it's a whole package, right? In that we are talking about school selection and also about the IP. So we will bring that in right at the latter part. But rest assured that it will be covered. Okay. So I think some of you are asking about the IP component, right? But there is a similar portion at the start where I have to go through some of the key considerations, right? Be it in terms of the selection process, selection strategies, and all that as well, right? Before we go to that, okay? Yeah. Then the next portion here, so really in terms of the strategy. So I think there's two key blocks of questions now, right? Which is really in terms of the strategy part and also in terms of the IP schools part. So these will be the two parts that I will be covering in this last part of the webinar, okay? So this part here, right? So this part here, what I will cover is the strategy, and then I will end off with a portion, a block on the IP selection part, right? So the selection process here, a thing that I wanted to highlight here is that there's really three main things that to highlight, which is how do we look at it in terms of the posting? Ultimately, the posting is based on merit and it is really based off the performance of the student in the in the PSLE, right? Which is really in terms of the PSLE results. Okay. So that's the part to take note. Okay. So that is the first and foremost consideration, right? For any posting exercise is by virtue of merit, right? Is by virtue of merit. But what's going to happen is that you will see here because of the new AL scoring system, what's happening is that in the past, right, when we have the T-score system, which is like, upon 300, you get 200 plus and so on, right? There are many more possibilities, right, that a child can get, right? So a child can get like 258, 257, 256, many possibilities. But right now, under the new system, there's a lot less outcomes. The outcomes are a lot more focused. So what happens is that it's quite likely that you will end up with a lot of students having the same overall PSLE score. That means it's quite likely now actually you have a lot of students who end up with the same score of like 10, for instance, right? And because of that, it also means that the competition for the schools become more intense in that you see the school is just basing off the fact that both students have 10, right? And if that's the case, then how do I know which student should go through? And that's why under this particular system, the cut-off point system, right, in terms of tiebreakers, in terms of your choice of schools, become much more important. So I'll just do a quick one here with regards to the tiebreaker system. So how does a tiebreaker work? The tiebreaker works where if you look at it this way, if two students apply to the same school, right, and there's only one last vacancy in the school, right? That means you can think of it as there's only one last position in the school, who will get it, right? Given that they both have the same score. So the way we do it here is that we will look at it in terms of tiebreakers, right? And the tiebreakers really there are three of them, where the first one is really in terms of the citizenship status, right? So if there are two students who applied to the same school with the same score for the final vacancy, the one who is the Singapore citizen, so let's say one is a Singapore citizen, one is a perm resident or a foreigner, the Singapore citizen will get the first advantage to enter, right? So that's the first part. Let's say they are both Singapore citizens, then that's where the second tiebreaker comes in. And that's why the order of schools is very important, right? So the order of schools becomes very important because if you put the school higher up in your choice, that means for this school A, let's say the school A, you put it as choice one, right? As choice one. Whereas for another student, for school A, they put it as choice two. Okay? What's going to happen is that actually the person who put it as choice one will get into that school, right? So because he has put it higher up, he has more in a sense, more advantage in that sense. So it's very important how you think about the choice order, right? So that's the thing that I also wanted to highlight, okay? And with that, right, so the idea here is I go a bit into the tips on choosing secondary school before we will go into the IP uh, ecosystem segment, which is here, if you look at it, what are some of the tips that you can already note when choosing secondary schools? Number one, uh, try to fill up all six choices. So sometimes a lot of parents may ask, okay, can I leave some schools blank? That means I have six choices, but I don't use all of them, right? So ideally, try not to do that because you should always think of it as you should have some safety buffer for yourself. Have schools that you can fall back on because you never know, right? So you never know whether it may be the case that um, that you don't get into your first choice school, second choice school, and if you don't fill with some buffers or some safety to fall back on, it may be the case that you don't get anything from your choices, and MOE just assigns you to a random school. So you want to avoid that. So definitely fill in the choices. Okay, that's one. And number two, the idea here is you can think of it like what I mentioned, right? The ranking matters. So if your preferred school, right, the ones that you prefer the most, it should be the highest. Because like what I said, the tiebreaker is in terms of the choice order. So if you have a dream school and you feel that you have a shot at that, that dream school should be in that choice one, right? Or else you will not have a shot at that, right? So to win in that tiebreaker, that's what you need to think about. So the general principle here is your preferred school. The more you prefer the school, the higher the ranking that it should go. Okay, so that's the second part. Third part here, I think in relation to some of your questions with regards to the mix of schools, the way to think about it is to really have three groups of schools. That's how I will categorize it. In which the first group, we will think of it as what we call as the stretch schools. So the stretch schools are the schools generally where the cutoff could be a bit lower compared to yours. So maybe you are at maybe a 8, but the cutoff for the school was a 7. So based on last year, you would think, okay, so you may not have a chance of getting in, but it's worth a try, right? Because it's just a 1. And if the school trends up to a one, +1 this year, you can actually get in. So it's worth a try, and you need to put it right at the top to increase your chance of getting in, right? So that is what we call as a stretch schools. So you can try one to at most two of that, but don't try all, because if you try all, you will realize that if you are so ambitious and you don't get into any, again the risk here is that you may end up with no schools, right? So two stretch at most, and then another two schools will be what I consider as target schools. That means schools that are more or less in line with your cutoff point. So let's say you are at a 7, so you're looking at schools with cutoff point last year of 7 or about 8. So these are schools that generally you would think of it as you do have a good shot of getting in, right? And put that in the middle, right? Finally, the last two, you can think of it as safety schools. So the safety schools here is schools that have cutoff points of about 2 or more, right, compared to where you are, right? So for example, let's say you are at a 7, you can look at schools that are 9 or 10 or 11, which is a backup, is a safety net. So that means if touch wood, anything happens and you don't get into your first four, at least there is a fallback for you, right? Where you can actually fall back onto your last two schools, right? So that is what we call as a safety option. Okay, so that's the thing to take note, right? So that's the part that is important to highlight, okay? So this is the key thing I wanted to highlight here. And now I want to go into a bit of a dive into the IP portion part, right? And for the IP portion here, right? And I know some of you here are interested in, this IP application. The thing to note here is how the IP actually differs between a conventional 4-year program leading to the O level or SEC versus the IP is that the IP really, you can think of it as it's like a through train in that we will bypass the the exams at Sec 4, and then you will go straight to year 5 and year 6. So in short, the student does not need to take the exam at year 4, and they can go straight to year 5 and 6, right? So that is how we think about it. It bypasses the exam at the 4th year. Okay, so you can even think of it as integrated program. Essentially, it's like a 6 years program. Okay, and the way I want you to think about it is under the integrated program, there's essentially three different types, different tracks that you can think about. So all of them bypasses the exam at Sec 4. But of the three different tracks, you can think of it as one track will lead, okay, each of them will lead to a key exam. You can think of it at the end of the year 6. So what do they achieve at the end of year 6, the whole 6 years? For one, it will be the A levels. Okay. Another would be the IB, or what we call as the International Baccalaureate, right? And finally, the last one is what we call as the NUS High School Diploma, right? So that's how we think about it for the IP program, right? Under which, if you look at the IP umbrella, there are three different pathways, right? And a very common misconception is a lot of people always mix up IB with IP. They like to think of it as, okay, is it IP versus IB, right? But you can see on this visualization, it's not like that. IB is a subset of IP. It falls under one of the pathway under the IP program. So that's the better way to think about it. So when you think about getting your child into the IP, there's essentially these three tracks that we are looking at. Okay, these three particular tracks that we are looking at. And when you see it that way, right? Now we then look at the schools under this particular ecosystem. Okay. And when you look at the schools under this particular ecosystem, you can see over here that there are some schools which is what we call as the dual track schools, right? And the dual track schools essentially are schools that offer both the IP program and the SEC program. What do we mean by SEC? Because for some of the parents here, you may feel that it's quite an alien term to you, right? So the easy way to think about it is SEC is the O level, right? But the name has changed because of subject-based spending, right? But these are the schools that offer both. That means it offers both the IP and also offer the SEC, right? This is what we call as dual track. And this is the list of schools. So why do I bring that up? It's because number one, for these schools, right, when you put it in terms of the 6 choices, it is possible for you to indicate them 2 times, right? So to your question, right? So I think some of you are asking, right? So for this particular one, is it possible to indicate the school two times, one for SEC, one for IP? Yes, right? So it is possible. So you can think from the perspective of somebody, let's say, who really wants to go into this school, right? So regardless of whether he wants to get through via IP or SEC, he just wants to get in. It is possible for him to indicate it two times, but as different program. So one under the IP program and one under the SEC. Okay, but it's only available to these schools here. For the others, right, you'll see for the other IP schools, they are not here. Why? Because they only offer IP, right? So that means they don't have a SEC equivalent. And then for other schools, then they don't have IP, right? Other schools, they only have the SEC program. And to be very clear, like what I mentioned just now, in the context of IP, there is no affiliation. So you cannot, because, oh, you have an affiliated school, I put it as the first choice, I get affiliated status. There is no affiliation advantage for IP program. Okay, so that is the part to be clear. Okay, so that's the first thing to note. Okay, okay, and next, okay, the next part to note here is if you look at the IP track that I talked about, we have three, right? So we started off talking about one pathway leading to the A levels. The A levels part, I want to show you all essentially that system of what it looks like in terms of the schools. So you can think of it broadly as there are two categories. The first one being what we call as that 6 years category. So 6 years category, you can think of it as essentially as the child applies to that school, it will be for a whole stretch of 6 years that they are within the school itself. And the examples are given here, right? So like River Valley, NJ, Diamond High. So they apply in, they get into Diamond High, and then for 6 years, year one, year two, all the way to year six, they will be in Diamond High. So that's how we call it in terms of a 6 years category. In short, they are in the school for 6 years. Okay, so that's one type of school. The next one is what we call as a 4+2 category. So what is a 4+2 category? In that, if you look at these two, they will both still lead to A levels. So regardless of these two tracks, at the end of 6 years, they still need to take A levels. But what's the difference here is that 4+2 is more like the way we think about it for parents, right? In the past, where you will have 4 years you spend in the secondary school and 2 years you will spend in the JC. So that's how we think about it. So if I give you an example using RI and RGS, literally the physical location is different. So that means it's all at Bishan now, right? So it's all at Bishan. But the first 4 years, year one to year four, let's say you go into RGS, right? You will be doing it at Raffles Girls School, right? So within the Raffles Girls School compound, year one to year four. After that, so what happens is you will skip the O level, you don't need to take that. Automatically, you will go into the junior college, right? But that is just physically another location. It's still in Bishan, but it's just a bit further down in terms of the campus. So your last 2 years, year five and year six, will be there. So that's how we think about it. So 4 years in that secondary school, and then 2 years in the JC. Okay. And you can see also another example is some of the schools have combined together to form this joint path. Like for example, for Eunoia, you do have at a secondary level, so people in different secondary schools, right? And they are all still part of a IP program, right? Cat High, CHIJ, SCGS, and then going on to the Eunoia part, right? So that is what we call as a 4+2 track. Okay, that's a 4+2 track. Okay. So then next, you will see over here, one thing that I wanted to highlight, right, is this is for the IB program, International Baccalaureate. And I want to talk a little bit about International Baccalaureate in that a lot of students have questions for International Baccalaureate. Like you have heard a lot probably from your seniors about A levels, but not much about IB. And do you all know why? The reason for that is because there aren't that many schools which offer international baccalaureate. So this one is IB, International Baccalaureate in Singapore. This is not A levels. You can see just now I show you all A levels, right? A levels there's a lot. A levels there's a few, right? Quite a few. But IB, International Baccalaureate, there's only this few only, right? And the reason for that is because actually it was a program that was newer compared to the A levels when introduced in Singapore, right? Not new as in new as a whole, right? So it has been there in the US, but in terms of introduction to Singapore, it came later compared to the A levels. But you can see here what happens is that for now, it tend to be more localized amongst these few schools, right? So you have ACS, right, SJI, and also a lot of the international schools in Singapore, right? A lot of the international schools in Singapore also offers the International Baccalaureate. Uh, and one very noteworthy thing that guys I can show you all, right? You see again the 4+2 category. There's really only one girls' school that opens up the route to a IB level program, right? And the girls' school is MGS, right? So that's just a nugget of information for you as well. That means if you are thinking like for a girl, you're thinking, okay, I want to go through a girls' school, IP program that leads into international baccalaureate. There's essentially only this option, right? So that's the part to note. Separately, I can give you all a nugget, which is there are three other special schools that also offer IB. And what is these three other schools, right? These three other schools are the international equivalent of our schools in Singapore. What are they? They are ACS International, SJI International, and Hwa Chong International, right? Then you may ask me, but teacher, these three schools, aren't they international schools? Aren't they available only for international students? So the thing about them is they have a certain quota for local students, right? So a lot of the students there are international students. So it's an exception thing, these three schools, but they have a quota for local students also. So that is the special part, right? But they are not part of the posting exercise. So if you want to get into them, it's a separate admissions. But in case there's a question on, which other schools offer IB, those three other schools also offer IB, right? And then I would say here, right? So then the very immediate question is, what exactly is international baccalaureate, right? You may wonder, right? Like, but teacher, right? So we talk about international baccalaureate. Is it recognized or not? Like I never hear much about it, right? And is it, good enough? If let's say my child next time wants to go into uh, you know, more competitive faculties, competitive departments, scholarships and everything, right? Is A level better since more people are taking it, right? Compared to IB and all. So here I want to clarify that misconception once and for all. And the idea here is that the IB diploma is definitely not an ugly sister to the A level. If anything, it is comparable, right? And the very best of the students in Singapore, right? Those who went on to get scholarships, those who went on to overseas Ivy League universities, getting, competitive, faculties in even like local unis, a lot of them have actually gone in via the international baccalaureate, right? So that's the key. So in short, you don't lose anything by being on IB, right? It's no less prestigious, right? At one point, I think many years ago, there was that concept of score dilution that people think of it as the signal is when you do IB, the score is not as the same value. That means when you get a perfect score, it's not the same value as a A level. But that has been changed over time, right? And really, I would say in short, that track record is there, right, in terms of the international baccalaureate. So that's the first thing to note. The next thing to note is that what exactly is the international baccalaureate and how does it then differ from the A level track? And you will see here a few things to note just off the bat because I don't think you all really want to deep dive into every single detail, but I want to give you all the noteworthy ones, which is number one, um, the IB diploma actually is a lot more broad-based compared to the A levels. So A levels, you can say that we do lesser subjects, right? We only do really only 4 subjects at A levels, but we dig deep. And so guys, you all can see here, right? So you can see the implication of where this is going, right? In that you can see I'm starting to talk about A levels and everything. And the reason for that is because if you are going to IP, your perspective must go beyond the 4 years, right? You must be even more forward looking, right? Because if you are in IP, the implication is that your choice does not determine your next 4 years. Your choice determines your next 6 years. You all see the logic behind that? So that's why if that is the case, your perspectives must consider the post-secondary part. So that is the implication that I want you all to take away. So that's why here I need to talk about A levels. I need to talk about international baccalaureate at the post-secondary level because that's where your child will be headed to. And you can ask, right? So is it easy to transfer, like if you change your mind and everything? So it's possible, but it's not that easy, right? In terms of once you are in a track to move out of that track, right? And so here under international baccalaureate, right, you can see over here essentially um, how it works is we have what we call as a core and 6 subject groups under the IB diploma, right? And what are the core elements under the IB diploma? Just to let you all know, right? There are 3 what we call as core parts, which is number 1 on theory of knowledge, right? Where you have to actually do some, presentation and essay. Number two is on what we call as the extended essay. So extended essay is very interesting in that you see this particular component. This is not in A levels. So what does this look like? So for those of us who had done research in universities, this is to prepare for research in universities, where the student will be doing some self-directed independent research, and they will come out with a research paper after that. Yeah, so it's to really prepare them for those university type skills in terms of research, in terms of independent study. And most of the time, what the student will do is they will land on a topic based on the subject that they take. So, say for example, a student lands on a topic for physics. So, I want to do a physics extended essay. I'm very interested in studying the impact of forces on so and so. So, I'm going to do some research. I'm going to write the essay on that, and they'll be graded on that. Right. So, that's the part. The next part is then on creativity, activity, and service, right? So what we call as a CAS project, quite similar to community service. So guys, I think you all can already see here the takeaway is from IB. It's a lot less like a final sit down, take the test kind of exam. If I would characterize A levels, right? So the A level pathway um, is very much sit down and take the test. That means at the end of 6 years, you go to the exam hall, you take the test, that score determines your your final A level outcome, right? Sounds very intimidating, but that's about it, right? There's not much for you to do outside of the exam hall, right? But for the IB, International Baccalaureate, there's a lot of this extra stuff that you do outside of the exam hall, right? You will do things like what I said, the extended essay, and all this counts to your overall score, but it's not done in the exam. It's done outside at home, in school, right? And it adds to your score, right? And it trains on skills that you see goes beyond exam. But A levels, I would say, still focus a lot on exams, um, very much exam techniques, building foundations for for rigorous study, right, in uni and everything. But you can see IB here is beyond just exam skills. They want to see all these different kind of life skills, research skills, and all that kind of thing as well. And a lot more writing, I would say. So for instance, if I show you next the subject groups, the takeaway here is you see for international baccalaureate, right? In terms of the subject groups, there are more, right? So a student in international baccalaureate number one will be taking more of these subjects compared to somebody at the A level track. That's number one. And number two, even in terms of the exam format also. So if I give an example, like let's say if you do physics at A level, it's more or less just a sit down exam. Of course, there's also practical lah. So you also take practical, but it's still a sit down exam. But in the international baccalaureate track, there is this thing that is what we call as the IA, the internal assessment. And that can go up to 30% of your overall score. And that one you can write at home. Right? You can write at home, your teacher will review with you, right, to improve it. And then finally you submit for final marks. And that can go up to 30% of your score. So guys, you all can see how different that dynamics is, right? And it's a very, for those of you who have been exposed to like the US education system and everything, it's a very that style kind of thinking that your final performance is not just a sit down exam, but there are different elements that contribute to that, be it in terms of projects, be it in terms of research, be it in terms of essays and all that kind of thing that you do. So that's how IB brings in, and that's the value add that a lot of schools do see in IB also, in that it imparts that kind of skills that you may not necessarily find in the A-level kind of system, right? Okay. You can ask me, right? So, like, factually, what do you think? Is it easier in IB compared to A levels? My take to you, I mean, to put it very, very honestly, is that it does depend on the subject. So, I myself have worked with students for economics, right, for IB and A levels. And the take is, I do feel that IB economics is easier compared to A levels, right? Be it in terms of the question coverage, be it in terms of some of the content, but it may not be so across different subjects. So it does depend on the subject, right? So that's the thing to note here as well. So this one will give you a flavor, right? So as you're thinking about different pathways, right? IB versus A level, how that would look like, right? So that's another part to take note. Um, and what is the perfect IB score? So if you look at it this way, right? This is the perfect IB score. A levels, in the end, you are still graded based on like A, B, C, D, which then gives you rank points that you can use for university. For IB, each subject will give you a perfect score of 7. So if you do well enough, right? That is like the equivalent of like the A score. So a good score, the best score that you can get for each subject is a 7, right? And then you take six of them, that's 42. Then plus the three core that we mentioned, that will be 45. Yeah. So a lot of a lot of the Singapore students are well known for being able to score above 40, right? So that's essentially how you look at it. So with that, right, hopefully that gives you a sense because a very common question is essentially, right, a very common question here is what is the difference and is it worse off? So I hope the very takeaway here is very clear to you. It's not an ugly sister, it's comparable to A levels, it's a different path. The offerings, the experience that you get is different, right? So based on what I've shown you, the judgment now you have to make is, is it worthwhile trying, right? So for some people, they really feel like this is what I want for my child, right? And if that's the case, then it's worthwhile for you to dig a bit more, find out a bit more about this. And if you feel that it is something that you find is worthwhile, then it should be in your six choices of school. Because if you don't put it in, then if you get into an IP school that goes to A level, then you'll be the A level track. Okay. And here is like what I mentioned. So MGS is the only girls' school with the true train that leads to the IB. Right. So there is no other girls' school that does that. Right. So that's also the other thought in mind. Considerations. So here I've thought, at some length regarding the IP ecosystem, the different pathways. I have not talked that much about the NUS High Diploma because why? The NUS High Diploma for most admissions into the school is based on DSA, right? So it's not as part of the Set 1 posting exercise. They do have some supplementary intake at the end, but if anything, it's more like the remaining spaces, right, that is not filled up from the DSA. But for that one, it's a very niche part. So I would say A levels and international baccalaureate are still pretty broad and comprehensive. NUS High is very niche in that it's really focused on the math and the science disciplines, and it similar to your DSA considerations is whether your child feels that that is something that is that works for them. Yeah, but it's part of the IP pathway, but I won't talk about it that much because it's not as relevant in the context of the Sec 1 posting. Okay. But now I think the question that also comes up is then, okay, IP as a whole. So I get it. What's the difference between IB and A levels? But, if I think about IP, what are some of the features of IP and is it suitable for my child? I think that's another thing that will come up. So let me take a while to go through some of this before I take some of the questions. The idea behind IP is that you must understand, while we do have that benefit of bypassing the year four exam, it also means that there is a lot more accountability, a lot more discipline that's needed on the part of the students because there's going to be more independent, self-directed learning, right? So there are some things that, is less spoon-fed to you. So I mean, in a more conventional school setting, what is going to happen is, okay, we have different subjects, different topics. I teach you, I go through work example, I let you practice and everything. It's scaffolded and guided. But in the integrated school program, what they do is for some of these, they actually look to students to really bridge the gaps in terms of some of this learning. So a lot more motivated, a lot more self-directed. That's the first part. Second part is very practically and specifically speaking, the topics covered may differ a bit. So what happens, I'll give you a very practical example, right? So at secondary school level for mathematics, we only learn simple interest, calculation of simple interest at Sec 1. Compound interest is something that we learn at Sec 3. But for some of the IP schools, what they will do is they will put compound interest in Sec 1 also. Why? Because the thought process there is I want to think about how students are learning, right? So if they're learning about interest, it makes sense for them to learn both together. Even though compound is a bit harder, but it's okay. I think my students can do it. So I'm going to make them do it. So you can see what happens is there are some topics that are funneled down from Sec 2 to Sec 1, Sec 3 to Sec 2. And then when you go to the upper secondary level, some possibly even from the A level side, they can funnel down as well. So that you must be prepared then. You can see in terms of that rigor, it is still there, right? So it's true that you don't have a milestone exam at Sec 4. But in terms of the rigor of what you have to study, it's still there. In terms of the discipline that's expected of you, I would say it's higher, right? And number three, it's not to say there's no test. So guys, to be very clear, there is no O levels equivalent, but there are still tests in school, right? There are still assessments. In fact, it's pretty frequent, right? So I was from RI last time. So last time, during the system, every week there was tests. So right now, actually, I won't say don't go away thinking like there's a every week test, but the key message here is there is still a frequency of tests. So it's not to say there's no tests. Okay. So these are the parts to take note. But what are the extra things? The extra things is you can see then the soft part of it, right? Because you see, there is no milestone exam. You take away the pressures of that. There's then space for them to develop more of these soft non-academic skills, like philosophy, public speaking, character development. So one very specific example is you can see like in year four, right? A lot of people are preparing for exams, right? But because these students don't need, so they can do a lot of different things. What is possible? Overseas attachment, internships, self-directed some of these, exposure to some of these, like be it working in a certain attachment or that kind of thing, or projects and all that also. So a lot more scope for that, right? And you can see because they took away the pressure of meeting just the pure syllabus and curriculum for the O level, there's a lot more leeway in which the school can teach certain things, right? So that's the key takeaway. But that specifics aside, what does it require of the student? I would say is really two things that you must be very disciplined, you must be very focused. Because I have many cases like peers and juniors, right? So they went into IP, they kind of just clown around for like the first 4 years, right? And they were, I mean, not very focused. And because of that, you realize that, their foundation was not really there. They kind of just smoked through. But when it comes to year five and year six, that's where they really struggle. So, the year five and year six is the important A level year, right? So that's the part they realize their foundation is not strong and they really struggle in year five. So when they struggle in year five, you know what happened? They fail their promotional exam, and they end up retaining in year five, right? Because the reality sets in. Because when year five, year six sets in, is exam mode again, right? And the reality is you only have 2 years to get to the A levels, and there's a lot of things to cover in 2 years, and the difficulty level will pick up again. So the expectation here is, without the discipline of say a milestone exam at Sec 4, do you still have that, accountability to carry through in terms of building a good foundation? At the same time, exploring all these different skills that is accorded to you opportunity wise, and being able to handle some of these difficulty level, be it in terms of the topics cascaded down and everything. So that's what you have to ask yourself, right? So I think with competitiveness, right? Because I mean, if you look at it in terms of these schools, also then comes with it certain expectations also, right? So in that sense, right? But it's not to say that it also depends across schools and also across subjects. So in terms of the difficulty level, I would say objectively, like certain subjects is well known in some IP schools is a lot harder compared to others. So it's not to say it's like the same level throughout. Okay? Yeah, so that's also the thing to note. Because the takeaway here is also very important is even within IP schools, right? The syllabus and curriculum is a bit different. So, like maybe RGS may have its own flow of how it carries out the science topics or math topics that can differ from another school, right? So that's also the thing to take note too. Okay, and then with that, right? So I think some of you may be thinking, okay, so now I know about the system, I know about IP. So what are the pros and cons, right? And I will lay out some of that here just for your own benefit, right? In that, so if you look back at just a Sec 4 program, this is the Sec 4 program, like taking the O levels, SEC lah, as we call it. What are the pros and cons of that? So there's quite a lot of things here, but to distill out really is, I would say the good thing here is essentially um, you have that safety net as you have the Sec 4 exam as a safety net that keeps you accountable, and of which at the end of it you go away with a certification, right? And some people prefer that, right? And some people prefer a more conventional system, right? Which will be that, right? But on the other hand, right, then your route will be a lot more constrained, right? So if you compare to a IP school in terms of the extracurricular, non-academic stuff that you can focus on, a bit less on that, right? And a lot more exam focused, particularly when you come to the upper secondary level, right? So that would be the key part that you can think about, right? Another thing that I can tell you that's very interesting is that, especially for those of you, I think for those of you in this talk, some of you are really, really thinking ahead, right, into how do I build network, how do I build a good portfolio, because I want my child to go somewhere next time, right? Be it in terms of scholarship, in terms of getting into competitive faculties. My own takeaway here is that even like my own experience at Raffles and everything, is that with a kind of like a true train program, right, where you are in the secondary school going to the JC, the benefit of that is that it comes with the building of a community and a network effect, where you already know the people there well, right? You know the culture well, and it puts you in a good position in terms of thriving and flourishing when you go to the post-secondary level, the A level track. No, so the year five and year six, right? Be it even in terms of CCA, like very practically speaking, because it could be your maybe we're part of the same netball team, right? And then you'll go to netball at Raffles Junior College, and and then is you feel well supported, or even easier, right, in terms of getting certain leadership positions and everything, because you already have the network compared to somebody who may not be in that. So I would say very practically that is one of the network effects that's actually very helpful for students along the way as well. Okay, that you may not really get if you are in the SEC, but it's not to say that it's totally closed off. Because I have seen also a lot of people who, like when they got into Raffles via O level, and they still did very well, right? So it's not to say that one is better than the other. It's just the different path to getting to the end goal, right? And IPA levels, so what are the pros and cons, right? So this one I think is something that is particularly, on your mind. So I think the pros is that number one, you are already guaranteed to be taking the A level. You are guaranteed a space in the junior college, right? And a lot of it is you also get a heads up in terms of studying some of these, topics that is, more advanced and so on as well. And also in terms of, like what I said, building up the network effect, right? And also being able to explore some of these, softer skills, non-academic skills. But the cons here is I would say the bar is higher in terms of what it requires of you on accountability, on discipline. And the idea is, it may not fit everybody. In the end, if some people feel that, the pace is not right for the person, he may feel that the pace is a bit fast as well, right? And also they won't have a cert, right? So they won't have something at Set 4. The next time they get a cert after PSLE will be A levels, right? So that's the thing there. But I would say whatever that allows IP students to thrive more is really a few things actually that allows them to thrive in adulthood equally, right? Discipline, accountability, and that willingness lah, to really continue to learn and to balance that also against some of these extracurricular pursuits too. Okay. And so then A level versus IB, I talked about it just now, right? When I talk about IB program. So IB a lot more broad, A levels is a lot deeper, right? Uh, and I think some of you were asking about Chinese as well, right? One very interesting part to note is the Chinese B at the standard level, the SL level for IB, is generally less demanding, right? So that's also the other thing to know. I think one of you asked about the Chinese program too, right? And like what I mentioned, so the key takeaway is A levels is a sit down exam. It's all or nothing actually. In fact, for all of us, as you take A levels, right, it's just what you do in the exam that determines your end goal, which is a bit intimidating. But IB, like what I said, there's a lot of those out of exam component, right? IA, extended essays, and everything. And I've seen students myself, because I've really like literally worked with students. Very, very interestingly, that my own take for certain subjects like economics, this particular student, given her foundation, I would say that she probably will be just passing for A levels. But for IB, she actually managed to get a 6 out of 7. And the interesting part is my own theory on how that worked is because she was put up by her internal assessment, right? The essays that she wrote right outside of the exams helped to pull her up quite a bit. But you won't have that for A levels. A levels is you go into the exam hall, you write the essay. So that's why you can see um, that difference lah. But it's not meant to be a blanket observation. So like I said, it depends from subject to subject as well. But it's just to give you a practical, specific view of that, right? Between the two, because I work with students from both actually. Okay. And with that, then you can see here, I've talked about the IP ecosystem. I've talked about some of these considerations, and what are some of the other things that you can think about is I think a very practical thought that does come out is the idea of, um, it sounds a bit, like far-reaching, but it is valid, right? Big fish in a small pond versus a small fish in a big pond kind of a system, right? So the idea is that you can expect, right? So in certain of these schools, that competitiveness that that rigor, right? Not to say that other schools are not rigorous, but maybe more coming from the perspective of competitiveness, right? So in terms of the environment, is that something that you would want your child? Do you feel that your child can thrive in, or do you feel that your child could benefit more from a more in terms of the pacing, right? Or more conventional system. That's one. Two is like what we said about the stress level, right? So when you are placed in a very high performing environment, how does the child react, right? Does the child clam up or does the child really thrive? Does the child really want to excel, right, relative to the peers? I think it's really also the personality and the character of the child. And ultimately, it's the personality and the strength. I mean, if you even ask me, right? So, maybe if I can share a story for myself, actually, when I was like choosing schools at my age, I didn't even want to really go to Raffles. So I had other plans in mind at the time. But my teacher was talking to me and he felt that it's a good opportunity given my score at that time. And she told me you should really give it a try. And that's why I gave it a try and I thought, okay, it worked out fine. But at that point in time, actually, when I thought about my own disposition and everything, I didn't feel that it was something uh, that I wanted to go into. But in the end, it was okay. So the takeaway from there also is that it's going to be a bit of exploration. Ultimately, there's only so much that you can gather about a school as well. So I mean, it's also about I know it's a cliche saying that people always say, right, that no school is a bad school, and but there is some truth in the sense that it's also ultimately what you make of yourself in the school. That every school will give you different opportunities, but it's how you make of it. And I can give you a very specific example. I have friends who went to through IP and they end up staying behind in year five. And I have friends who did the conventional route to SEC in year four, but they end up doing really well, right? They end up going to really competitive junior colleges and doing really well for university. So many a time is really what you make out of the experience, the kind of qualities that you bring to it too. Okay. Yeah. And yeah, so here is the part that actually I've already gone through that. I'm sorry I went a bit over time. And just to be clear also, I know that we also mentioned, so the IP part is one of the key focus, but I also wanted to bring in the key view at the start because I thought that was quite critical. As I can see, also some of the parents didn't quite know some of the things there. So it's important to also clarify that, be it in terms of the over system, upking system, scoring strategies and everything, so that it comes into a more holistic package lah. So hopefully that provides that perspective. But here is where I would answer some of these questions and also pause to take some of the questions from the chat. Okay. Yeah, over here. Okay. So I will answer some from here and then I'll take some from the chat. And then this is where we'll wrap up. Okay. So the thing to note here, okay. Okay, let's just go one by one. I think there's a question on third language I will take together, right? So should my child take a third language in secondary school? So I can give you an example as well. So for third language, right? Um, a lot of students, myself included, right? When I went into school, I was able to take third language. I was very happy because I was thinking, okay, finally I can take third language. I want to take Japanese because I'm very interested in like manga and anime, right? So I want to take that and learn that. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm quite good at language. Even in primary school, I could do like, English and Chinese very well. So why not? But in the end, you know what happened? So I went to secondary school. I took Japanese. I end up dropping it within 1 month, right? So within 1 month of taking the third language, I dropped it. And the reality is why is because I realized as I was adapting to school, um, I couldn't quite manage at the start, right? So frankly, truth be told, when I first went into I thought the pace was a bit fast for me. Then I realized, wow, I cannot balance that and still balance my third language. Because third language is something that you do after school, right? You don't do it during school time. You do it after school. It takes up time. And in fact, I realized I don't have the time, right, to learn a new language at that time. And so I end up dropping it within 1 month. And that's what's going to happen also for some people. I'm not saying it happens to everybody, but the takeaway here is that it really depends on the attitude of the individual. And the very important part to note here is that it does not really give you an advantage that, oh, it's one of the I must do thing for a great student, so I must take third language because I can take it. It's not like that, right? A lot of us is like, what will happen? Like for me, I will take it and I'll end up dropping it at some point. That's the first thing. Second thing is you will realize also, very, very importantly, is that some will be like that, some will thrive. So I have friends who went on take Japanese, did really well and they built a career around Japanese. Some will thrive. So so my take to it is that if you can take it, it's no harm exploring. It's no harm exploring. I will know that some people will say, some people's advice lah is don't waste your time, don't take it. I won't really put it so black and white. I will say it's worthwhile exploring. Why? Because you have the option to drop, and you never know yourself, right? Your There is a difference in different people's strengths. So my strength is I can't do it. I drop it in a month. My friend, he did it all the way until adulthood. So it's worthwhile exploring. But if you find that it doesn't work, then drop it. If it doesn't work, drop it. No point sticking to it if it doesn't work. Okay, that part is very clear. Why? Because there's always chances for you to do it later. So at adulthood, a lot of people, like my own experience also, like in university, they also have modules on Japanese and everything. So as a student here, right, you don't need to worry that like FOMO and you miss out on something, because in fact, studies have shown that if you do it at adulthood, you can do it faster. Like within one semester, one term, you can learn faster than a child can do it. And why? Because the adult is more motivated. So that's my response to that. Okay, so that's the first part. Second part, six options. I talked about it already. Yes, do exercise all six options. Third, if you are not allocated any of your school choices, like I said, try to avoid that at all costs. So the reason why you are given the choices is because it's meant for you to be maximizing your chances of whatever you want there, right? So do not try to, do not have this outcome, because if you have this outcome, you have no control over where you will go. Okay. Four, yes, citizenship matter. So like what I said, the first tiebreaker is citizenship, right? But guys, like what I said, right? So at this point in time, think about what you can control, right? So when the results come out, you are not going to be able to control your um, score. You're not going to be able to control your citizenship status and everything. But what you can control are your six choices. I know I have not gone into the specifics of the six choices that much, but that's also because next week we have those targeted score range things that we'll go through that in more detail. And I think it's also better that way because right now you also don't have your score. Correct? So I think for now, some of the general guiding principles, some of the pitfalls and conceptions will be helpful enough. But once you get your scores, that's where do remember to sign up for the score specific session. And that's where we can have more targeted discussion. Like for each score range, what are the pitfalls, what are the things to take note of as well, and what can you control, right? And how should you place your school so that you can maximize your chances also, right? Yeah, so that's the thing. Okay. And fifth, affiliated school, I've talked about it. So it has to be indicated as your first choice, okay? In terms of the school selection and everything, okay? So I will take a bit more questions before I finish up for the day. Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so I think in terms of some of the questions, okay, if you wish to put an IP school, so this parent asks IP school as the first choice, what would be the chance of getting into another IP school if it's placed as second choice? Will the chance be wasted? I think the way to look at this question is it does depend on your score range, right? Your cutoff point. So it's not going to be possible to answer this without the context of your cutoff point. So the way I'm thinking about it is probably when this parent asks about this, right? So if I put two IP schools first and second, is it wasted? It depends on your score. So if these two said IP schools are so-called what we call as stretch schools, I would say that it's not wasted in the sense that um, you are just trying, right? And you have to try because if you don't try, you will not get in. So you see, one of the very common misconception a lot of students and parents, some of the parents even have, is that it's the self-conscious mentality that come in. So they will be like, okay, I'm at say like a 10, right? And I want to go into a school that is like 8, right? And then they say, wow, 8, actually not much chance leh, right? Because it's quite far from where I am. So I'm going to not put that as my first choice, right? I'm going to put a school with cutoff 10 as my first choice. Then my second choice, I then put the 8 lah. I mean, can try a bit, right? What's the problem with this? What I just told you all just now. The problem with this is that by default, he's just going to end up with his first choice. He will have zero chance of getting into his dream school, right? Because he has put it as second. And because whenever a tiebreaker comes in, he will be disadvantaged. So that is the mechanics that you all need to know. That's why the thing here is that if it is a stretch school, it has to be first. As to whether the chance is wasted, the idea here is that um, it's your own call to make, right? do you want to try or not to try? I can't tell you. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you will you get in. But what I can tell you is if you want to get in, you have to put it as a first. So then the judgment here is if it's indeed the case that you can think of it as being wasted, but the other way to think about it is you still have five other options to go back on. So if you don't go to your first, you don't go to your second, the fact that I put it as third and fourth is your target school, fifth and sixth is your safety school, it should be able to catch you somewhere. So that is the system that you need in place. My advice to you is you just don't put more than two as stretch. In fact, I would say some people are safe side, they just put one as stretch, and that's good enough. You don't put up to three or more. That is quite dangerous already, right? And certainly don't put six. That's the worst, right? Because you don't get into any, you waste all your school choices away. Okay, yeah. So that's the part to take note. Preparing. So this parent asked, how do we prepare our schoolies for different AL scores? Um, yeah. So this one is something that I talk about. So as mentioned, a two-step process. Use the school finder and also the tool that we provided to cast the net wide. Look at the schools within the range. I would say identify a list of about 10 schools for now. Then discuss with your child, right? So of these 10 schools, how can we order it? Which one is the one that we really want to get into? And then you can get a list going from there. Also remember to do a deep dive for the schools. So try to, ask your seniors, go to the website, open houses to find out more information on that. Okay, yeah. Yes. So under the third language portion, it will be offered. So there are several third language options that are offered there. So you can implicate that under that, right? So this person is asking about the types of languages that are offered under the third lang option. Okay. Yeah, so the IP one I have covered. So any specific on questions on IP, you can also let me know. Okay, so I think it's a balance, right? So it's getting the front overview and also in terms of the specific IP type, IP issues. Okay, um, yeah, okay. So next, okay, another question: will we only get one of six or can we get two out of three and give our final choice? So guys, so you only get one school. So it won't be like I give you six schools, then three schools come to you and say good news and we want you inside, you go and decide. It doesn't work like that. So it's not like DSA offers like that. It doesn't work like that. So this student parents asking, do we get one school out of six, or can we get like two or three offers and choose? Don't have, right? You cannot. The algorithm works like that, right? So once you hit and there's a match, it assigns you, you go into the school. No other thing really. You cannot then, hey, wait a minute, actually, I want the other school one, right? The one that is below. Right? No, don't have really. That's why I said the choices of your school, the mechanics of it is very important. Okay? So that's the part to take note. Okay. School culture. What is school culture? Okay, school culture is generally the environment of the school, be it in terms of the teachers, be it in terms of the students themselves. It's something that I think you will appreciate a bit better, particularly once you go to secondary school, right? And as you go for open houses and everything, that different schools really have their own different unique culture. And it's something that's a bit more abstract. It's hard for you to just know from what I'm explaining. You have to go and feel it, right? You have to go down to the school, see how the students interact, how they behave, what are some of the key focus areas of the school, what do the principals, the teachers stand for, and everything. That's where you can appreciate it a bit more. Okay. Yeah, so failing the PSLE, as mentioned, the option here is really um, if you go above the 30, then the option is to retake, right? Staying back and retake. Or there's also like specialized schools, like pathlight schools and everything, right? So this one is in regards to a question on failing the PSLE. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So remember, guys, posting group three, yes. In fact, for the posting group three part, that's where you will indicate the options for both the IP and the posting group three, right? Those will be under that particular category. Okay. So this is with regards to signing up for PG3 and also for IP. Okay, Ken? Okay. Another question from a parent. So this parent asks, for example, score 8, school A cutoff point is 9. Even if I put school A as 6, I still can't get in. Okay, so guys, this is why I appreciate your understanding because I'm also a bit mindful of time. For some of the very specific school placement things, because we have a lot more sessions next week, I may only do that next week instead. So that also I'm mindful of taking up your time also. So I'll go through some of the other questions too. So for this one, I think I would that's something that you can just hold first. That's the thing to know. But okay, so to give you all a take, so this parent asks, score 8. School A cutoff point is 9. Even if I put school A at sixth place, I can still get in. Is that right? Okay. I would say that you do stand a high chance of getting in, right? But I cannot say confirm, right? There's no such thing as confirm plus chop one, right? Why? Because if you see the logic here, guys, so some of it is we have to think of that particular logic, right? So if I just paste that out, in the chat, right? Hey guys, sorry, I'm mindful of the bit of the time, but I will just take a while to just finish up all the questions. So for those of you who do need to go, do feel free to go ahead. But for those of you who can stay, just feel free to stay a bit longer. Okay. So this was a question, right? And this one here is like what I said. In this case, why would I say you do stand on short, but it's not like confirm plus chop? Why? Because we have to think of a case where what if schools A cutoff point trend down to 8? Right? That's the possibility, right? So, but I will say that you do stand still quite a good chance of getting in, right? In this regard. Okay, so but there's only that particular scenario where there's also a possibility that it can trend down. So I would say that on the safe side, right? It's good to, like I said, safety net wise, that last two schools or so, right? So not don't have just one, because now I don't know whether your intent is just to have this one, right? But for me, to be on the safer side, I would have said probably like fifth choice, maybe it could be this one. Then maybe my sixth choice, right? I may put it as like a cutoff point with 10 or 11. So you see, it's very measured, right? So I know die freak, like freak case scenario, cannot get into fifth. Six, I can confirm get in one, because if it's two or three, definitely there's a safety net. You see what I mean? So sometimes it's also about the safety buffer and everything. Okay, so that's the thing that I want to take note here. Okay. Uh, yeah. So posting logic. So this parent asks about posting logic. Is the posting logic as follow? Post AL4 to their first choice, send all remaining to second, and so on. Repeat for AL5 and so on. Yes, you can think of it that way. But guys, I think so for this case, right, don't need to worry too much about the posting logic. Because that one is super complicated. Because you think of it, right, in terms of the full algorithm, simplistically is part of this. But think about what it means from you. I would suggest that. So it's a lot less confusing and a lot clearer for yourself. And what it means for you is that you have three tiebreakers, right? And the three tiebreakers is on the effect of citizenship, right? Choice orders, and then after that will be randomized balloting. So the general principle here, think about what it means for you in terms of the principle, is that the school that you most want to get into, it should be your top choice to maximize the chance. And in terms of your six choices, balance it out in terms of stretch, target, and safety. That will do. Don't I would suggest you don't go too much into how does the algorithm work, and all that kind of thing. It does get a bit mind-boggling, right? So don't need to really go there. As long as you follow these principles, you will be safe in maximizing your chance of getting your schools in. Okay? Yeah. Okay, so IB, so as I mentioned, International Baccalaureate, right? Which schools allow for International Baccalaureate? International Baccalaureate, as mentioned, ACS, St. Joseph, right? These are the ones that offer for that. Okay? Can? Yeah. So these are the part, okay? Yeah. Hey, Ambu, what do you mean by no? Can let me know, okay? Yeah. Okay. Gerard, right? So will a student get into a school if he has met the cutoff point and has a better score? Okay, this one I have answered already, right? So something similar just now. Okay. Yeah. Yes, so Irene, so if students don't take higher mother tongue, are they still eligible to apply for SAP schools? So the answer is yes, actually. So perhaps maybe let me just illustrate using this slide, okay? So that is clear for everybody. The idea is that essentially, if you look at the slide, this is the slide on the higher Chinese one. So I think there was some questions on that. So let me just take it all together. So guys, if you look at this slide, right, everybody can see this slide, correct? You can see over here, right, this dude here, right, this student, no higher Chinese, want to go into SAP, but he got 7, PSLE score 7. Then the second guy, PSLE score 8, distinction for higher Chinese. Who do you think will get in? Do you think it's this guy or the first guy here or second? You all can type in the chat. Is it first or second? So you see the first guy, 7, but he never take HCL. Second guy, 8, distinction HCL, who will get into the SAP school? First or second? Yeah, 7 get in. Exactly. Right? And this proves the point, right? You don't need HCL to get in. It's on the merit of the score as the key consideration. So if your score is solid, you don't need to worry, right? But the only worry is if match for match, there's a last vacancy, you are a 8, that guy is a 8, you're fighting to get in, then that's where the HCL part will come in. That's why in that case, you see the distinction will beat out the merit. The merit will beat out the pass will beat out the no HCL. Yeah. You understand the logic? So that's how we think about it. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, correct. So for schools that offer IP and SEC, you have to indicate as two separate choice because IP means you want to go to IP. SEC, you go to SEC. Okay? Yeah. Okay, does distance make a difference at the balloting stage? I would say that in terms of distance, these are more considered in terms of when the assign the schools after you don't get into your six choices. So it's more coming from that perspective. That's where you don't get your six choices of schools. When MOE assigns the schools, they try to see right the places that are nearer to you. Then that's where they assign it. Okay. Appeal process. So appeal process is only done after the posting exercise are done. So this parent asks what are appeals. Appeals is like, okay, all done. You get the results, like literally where you are posted to, and you really feel like you want to appeal that process. So that's where the appeal happens, right? So there is an option for appealing. Okay, yeah, okay. Will COP differ by two or more? Okay, so COP can differ by two or more. So guys, right? So y'all can see one interesting thing is if you all analyze the trends from the past, I would say the interesting part is generally in different years, you won't see that much change in the most competitive schools. Those are pretty stable. Except that last year was a bit of an anomaly. Then you see some of the competitive schools drift down a bit. But at most, it's also plus minus one. But sometimes it can be plus minus two or more. In fact, these are the ones that are usually in the mid tier and the other end of the spectrum. Why is that the case? Is because there's a lot of variation. So if I give you an example, right? Some schools that have been climbing, for example, like Yusof Ishak and everything. I mean, there are different examples. So just giving us an example, it could also be different factors like they move. So they move from one place to another place. They move to Pongo, new environment, new facility, new campus, good name. And then from there, people know about it. Demand goes in. So remember, it's all about demand and supply. And then you can think of it logically. Yeah. So because it's demand and supply, it creates more variance for these kind of schools as compared to those schools at the other tier, which is already very well established. Correct. So generally, for those very well established one in terms of the name and the track record, then from year to year is pretty stable. Right. The only difference is only in the dragon year, where because there's more increased demand, those can flood into different pockets. Okay. So that's the thing to note. Okay. So I've answered all in the Q&A. Let me take the a few others in the chat, and then we should be done for today. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I've talked about COP. Yeah. Okay. So guys, so this question, right? How do we interpret if the cutoff point is 7 merit for IP track? Does it mean 7 pass cannot get in? So I would say based on last year cannot. Correct? Because last year cannot the cutoff was the last student was 7 merit. Yeah, right. But is it worth a try? So then your thinking should be okay. Is worth a try because you ask yourself the question is like that. So how do I know, right? So this school should I try for it? Is it my dream school? Right? Is it really the school that I want to get in and I want to give it a try? Right? And if so, I think it's worth a try. Because right now you're at a 7P, right? And that school cut off last year was 7M. That drift can happen, right? Um, so definitely, right, it's worthwhile just put it as the first, but do it as a stretch option now. So that would be one of your stretch option. And then just remember again, pack your six choices with some of the safety and target schools, then you should be fine. Okay? Yeah, so that this is in relation to this particular question here. I'm just repasting some of it so that you all can also refer to what I'm answering. Okay, so that's that. Okay, and then yeah, the appeal one I've talked about it. Okay. Okay, this question, what would be the academic pace for O-level pass out as he has to learn JC syllabus in just 2 years when compared to IP kids learning it across their 6 years. Okay, so guys, to be clear, the IP students don't start learning JC in Set 1, Set 2 also. If anything, the JC post-secondary material only come in usually upper sec. So it's not that big a gap, guys. So it's not like, oh, Set 1, I already learned JC, but other people Sec 4 then learn JC then learn JC. It's not that big a gap. Usually in JC, I mean in IP program where they cascade down is usually at the like upper secondary level. So it's not that big a gap. Okay? Can? Yeah. Yeah, IP and SEC program, two separate choice. I've talked about it. Okay. Higher mother tongue, I have also talked about it. After O levels, do students go to IB at year five? Yes. So that's how we think about it, right? So, uh, year five, year six, you cover and achieve the IB program credential, and year five, year six, you go and achieve the A level credential, depending on the pathway. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share on percentage of local university places for IB diploma. So that's something that but I can tell you very definitively is as well regarded. In fact, I can even share with you a fact is that a lot of the best students, even the best schools, are looking to, where possible, to cater to IB offering because they are increasingly seeing like even universities, Ivy League around the world also recognizing it also. Yeah, so that's the thing to take note. Okay. Um, yeah, so I think these are the key ones. I've answered most of them. Uh, yeah, okay. So some of the others, right? Like what I said, because it's very specific in terms of the school choices, like cut-off points and everything. So I would take that as part of the next week session for the consultation, for the different score bands lah. I think that will be the key part, okay? Yeah, you're right. So guys, there's not much choice in international baccalaureate. Uh, it's just what it is now. Yeah, so that unless the school starts to offer more, which I hear that actually some schools, even in some of the A-level schools, they are thinking, is it possible to bring in the offering? That's what I'm understanding. But I think it will take a while for those to happen. But right now, it is true that the IB universe is a lot smaller, right? The international baccalaureate universe is a lot smaller. In fact, a lot of the students that I worked with in the past, they were not even local students. They were international students. They were studying in international schools actually. Yeah. And then some of those were like, the ACS and all as well. Yeah, but you're right in that more will be on the A-level track for now. Okay. Yeah. So guys, I want to just wrap up here. And thanks very much for those of you who stayed behind the very last portion, which is just to let you all know two things as a next step. So I've told you all what's the next step. I also suggest for you all to maybe Swati can help me to post in the link the study guide and tool that we have. So what you all can access here, right? So in terms of this school search function. So I would suggest guys use this link, right? So this particular link here, this school guide is a one-stop guide developed by my stretcher to support your every step of the way. Today is just the beginning actually, and I hope that it has been helpful for you. But what we'll do over the next few days is that we are also going to have, you see, so you all can see all the events here. We will have our score strategy workshop. So once you know your score, what I need you all to do, right, is you all can use here and you can submit your score here. You see, you click on submit draft selection, you can submit your score. What that will do for us is that we can then have a sense of what everybody's score is, right? And also you can see here, right? So let's say I got a score of 4, posting group, okay, maybe I'll put a score of 8 lah, right? And then posting group 3 and key in the selection for us, right? So you see what happens here is that, so let's say if I just do a random key, so then this one I have to put it a bit higher a bit so it's easier to see. So I will just show you how this works. So I key in, right? Key in, okay? Okay, I just do a random one last in the interest of time, right? I key in the schools, okay? And then after that, when I press submit, right, I want to show you all a feature that we have, which is there is already some insights that you can glean from that. So number one, you can see you have submitted the school choices. Using the analysis function, you can actually get a sense of which are the ones where your cutoff is met and the categorization. But to be very clear, this is not the part where we are prescribing whether your option is wrong or correct, right? That's not what we are doing. But we are just stating factually based on some of these criteria and all, how we are labeling it. That's all. And you can just use it as a sense to it's actually just a mapping actually, right? But as to the real insight, right? So as to, does it work? Does it maximize your chance and everything? If there are certain, doubts from there, that's where we will also take some of these samples on an anonymized basis. So next week, what we'll do is we'll take some of these anonymized that we feel are representative, and we will highlight to everybody to tell you all, okay, how it should be done, what is a good example, what is one that needs more work, what are some of the misconceptions and that kind of thing. But what we need to help you do is to put this in, right, so that we can have that information to go through with everybody. And rest assured that we will anonymize. So we're not going to put your name and your score and everything. We won't do that. We will take the anonymized copy just to distill the insights for next week's session. Okay. So that's how we will do it. So that's what y'all can already do. You see, so y'all can already do this using the tool. You can also, like what I mentioned, even look at the browsing of the school. So if you click on the browse school function, you can see like why I show you all the listing of the schools already, right? So that's the other thing that you can do. So is that the second thing? Just remember, so once your results are out, do use this function, submit the results for us so that we have a base for looking at the information for next week so that it's helpful for everybody. Then here are all the webinars that you can look at. So we have planned out a lot. So we have 7 literally. I mean, the choice is we could have done it as one, but we thought that there's some interesting insights that we can do for different groups. And we will even bring in some students for some of the, where possible, right? For some of those, maybe the IP score bucket as well, right? So that they can also share some insight then. So we thought it's more useful and more targeted that way. That's why we have done it like that, just to help everybody along, right? So do feel free to click, right? And finally, on 28th November, we also have a Ask Anything night where you can clarify anything that you want, okay? Before the D-Day deadline, lah, right? So hopefully it's a good support system for everybody too, okay? So that's the key thing to note, and do use this link to try, right? To already try out the things and also let us know if anything as well, okay? Um, yeah. Okay. Can. Yes. So, with that, actually, we have come to the end of the session. One last thing also that I just want to let everybody know is, with regards to for our my stretcher students, so let me just put that up just as a reminder that actually we do have our My Stretcher Achievement Award. So for students who are enrolled in our weekly classes or even in our boot camps previously, this is award that you are eligible for. Uh, Depending on the scores and the achievement that you exemplify lah, right? So this is a way for us to really recognize and really motivate our students along. So for those of you here, with My Stretcher, but of course you see this whole webinar is open to everybody. But I think in terms of some of these achievement awards and all, we're also seeing how we can better incentivize and encourage our students to really work harder. That's why we also have this for them. So do take a photo, get this link, and that's where, once your results are out, you can also submit it there. And then that's where we can use for, like these awards and everything too. Okay, Ken? So it's just for you all to take note. Maybe Swati, you can also post the link in the chat, and then the students and parents can access from there. Okay? Yeah. So with that, right? And just to highlight, so the achievement awards, actually there's like the academic awards and also like the special awards. And the special awards, really, we are also noting that it's not just about the academic scores, but it's also about whether students make progress and whether they also exemplify certain other characters too, right? So that's where we are coming from too. Okay, Ken? Yeah. So with that, I think I've answered all the questions. Sorry that it overspill a bit, because I really wanted to see whether I can answer as many questions as possible. So this is the main thing that we will cover for today. Rest assured, actually, there will be other uh, webinars lah, right, from next week, and even tonight also. So tonight we will do one, but I won't go through the IP portion, but it will be more of the key part, right? So yeah, do let us know if any questions along the way, right? So this whole week we will be supporting everybody on this journey. Can? Okay, so if nothing further, then that's all for today. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. Hope it was helpful, and really hope to see you all. And really best of luck also for uh, the results and all. Okay, and remember, don't think of it as the end all and be all, just the first of many milestones, right? So take it in your stride, and we see how we can make the best use out of it. Can? Okay. So thanks everybody, right? And we will see you